and Kosovo have tremendous numbers of people in the United States. They love your country. They love your country so much. They love your country so much. And it's really good that we were able to get this done. I've had a lot of people here that would like to see and would be very proud to see this happening. There's been tremendous death over a long period of time, and that all stops. We've also made additional progress on reaching peace in the Middle East. I will say that Kosovo and Israel have agreed to normalization of ties and the establishment of diplomatic relations. The agreement we made with UAE has been incredible, what it's represented, what it's meant. And we have other countries in the Middle East coming very much to us and saying, like, when do we go? When can we sign? I think we're going to have great peace in the Middle East, and nobody's been able to say that for a long time. Serbia is committed to opening a commercial office in Jerusalem this month and to move its embassy to Jerusalem in July. That's fantastic. That's a big thing. That's a very big statement, and we appreciate that very much. It's taken tremendous bravery by the president of Serbia and the president of Kosovo, who are with me today, two highly respected people, to embark on these talks and to come to Washington to finalize these commitments. By doing so, they've made their countries, the Balkans, really an incredible area of some of the most beautiful land in the world. But they've made the world safer. I look forward to seeing Serbia and Kosovo prosper as we work together on economic cooperation in the region going forward. I look forward to going to both countries someday in the not too distant future. We have a thing called a campaign going on right now, so I think we better devote a little time to that, but we look forward to it. But we're very proud of these two great leaders and for getting this done, and their people are very proud of them, maybe more importantly. And truly it is historic. So I want to thank you both. And if you'd like to sign, you could start, and we'll start the process. Okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to give you this one. This is for you. Thank you very much. And this is for you. That's for you. That's for you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Would anybody have any questions for these two great leaders? They are great leaders, too.
Yes, can I ask when, gentlemen, it would be possible to expect normalizing ties politically between your two countries?
So, would you like to respond, or I could have somebody else? Robert, would you like to talk about that?
So I think that the focus here, and I don't want to step on President Vučić or Prime Minister Hoti, but I think today is about normalization of economic ties, and it's really a fantastic step that the two peoples have taken, both Kosovo and Serbia, and it's taken a lot of effort. I think that's a first step, and I think down the road, as those economic ties grow, I think there will be political solutions to outstanding issues. But today we want to focus on the normalization of economic relations between the companies, the opening of border crossings, investment by the United States in both Kosovo and Serbia, deals between Kosovo and Serbia on recognizing each other's diplomas and licenses, so that a dentist who's trained in Kosovo can perform his practice or her practice in Serbia and vice versa. So I think there's just a lot of amazing steps that we're taking here, and so I think the focus today is on the economic normalization. And our feeling is that that's going to lead to breakthroughs on the political front in the future.
It's going to really bring them together. Rick Grinnell, please.
I think everybody knows that we've been stuck politically in this issue for decades, and many times fighting about symbolic things. And what President Trump did from the very beginning is say, let's flip it. Let's figure out how to do economics first. You can't pay your rent and you can't buy food with symbolism, but you can when you have a job. And from the very beginning, what President Trump said is, let's give them a little taste of the Trump economy. Let's show them how to develop economics, how to take industries and grow them. And let's see if the concentration on economics and job creation can unstick the political stuff. That remains to be seen. But I think one of the great parts of this agreement is over the next year, we have a freeze on the recognition and derecognition campaigns. That means over this next year, we can see job growth and job creation really take hold in the region. And then a year from now, judge us on where the political process goes.
Thank you, Rick. And speaking of job growth, I think it's important to say that our unemployment rate dropped all the way down to 8.4%. It was just announced an hour ago. And that is many, many months ahead of schedule. They said you won't break 10% at least until next year sometime. And we just hit 8.4%, and we're going down rapidly. Plus, a lot of jobs were produced. But very important, we just broke the 10% mark, and that wasn't going to happen until January, February, March, maybe. And so we're at 8.4%, and that starts to sound much more normal. We're recovering from the China plague, and they are too, by the way. They got hit very hard. Every country did almost. 188 countries got hit. But 8.4% is an incredible number, way ahead of schedule, way ahead of schedule. So again, any other questions for the two gentlemen?
Mr. President, what was your role, Mr. President, in bringing about this economic agreement, and why did it take decades to get to the point that we are at today?
Well, I can tell you that it took decades because you didn't have anybody trying to get it done. We've been working on this for almost from the beginning of the administration, and you had some deep-seated feelings and long-term feelings, and there was a lot of fighting, and now there's a lot of love, and that's the way it's going to be. I think they're going to have a tremendous relationship, and the economic is going to bring them together. It's going to unify the two countries, and it was just something that was so obvious to me right from the beginning. And Rick Grinnell, I think in particular, he would talk about it all the time. He didn't understand why this had to be, and he was right. And he brought them together with Robert and with Jared and Avi. So many people were involved, but it just seemed to be such a natural fit. And I think you're going to see some really tremendous things are going to happen. In addition, it's going to be great economically for both countries. Plus, it also opens up the United States much more easily to both countries. We don't have to worry about these two sort of warring nations, fighting nations. And I think they're going to have a fantastic relationship. Economics can bring people together, and that's what's happening right here. But my people did a fantastic job. They really did a fantastic job. Any other questions for the? Yes, please. I'd like you to say.
If you allow me, I'm really honored and privileged to be here and representing Serbia here in Oval Office. And thank you, Mr. President, for doing a great job. When I say great job, I really mean it, because your people and you wanted to engage yourself into a matter that, as a matter of fact, very few people wanted to do, and also your commitment to stabilize the region and to bring peace and stability into the region is something that we appreciate a lot. It's something of an utmost significance for us. But speaking about economy, of course, speaking about politics, we haven't resolved all our problems. There are still a lot of differences between us, but this is a huge step forward, and I am once again profoundly grateful to you and to your people that you successfully got us here. And we didn't speak about many items that we signed today, but for us it's very important that we are going to have a unified economic zone in an entire Western Balkans, which will bring us to the real economic results for the benefit and for the sake of all our people. Once again, Mr. President, we appreciate and we respect your role. And if I may use or misuse this opportunity to extend an invitation to you to visit Serbia. The last US president that visited Serbia was Jimmy Carter because of Tito's funeral. Come to Serbia and you'll see the most hospitable reception, and you'll see how people of Serbia would react to them. Once again, many thanks to you, many thanks to Rick, to Jared, to Mr. Pence, to Robert O'Brien, to all the people that dedicated their time and bringing us here to our
Thank you.
office. Thank you once again.
Congratulations. Thank you very much. Please.
If I may, Mr.
Yes,
President.
please.
So thank you very much for your exceptional role and for your great team that we came to this point. I think absolutely this is a great moment for Kosovo and for the region. I think we made a huge step forward toward full normalization of relations that should lead eventually to mutual recognition between the two countries. We are fully committed to work together to improve people's lives, to create new jobs in the region, and we fully believe in your administration. We share the same values of freedom, democracy, and open market economy. So we are looking forward to start implementing this agreement as soon as possible.
Going to be very successful. We have no doubt.
Absolutely.
We have no doubt. It's too bad this couldn't have happened many years ago, but you needed somebody to
That's right.
work it and bring it together. So congratulations to both. Mike Pence, please.
Oh, Mr. President, I just want to extend all of our congratulations to the President of Serbia and the Prime Minister of Kosovo. Mr. President, you demonstrated again a commitment to peace. And today's agreement on economic cooperation, we believe, as the President and Prime Minister do, as you do, that this is an important step toward peace in the Balkans in the long term. But let me also say how much we appreciate and welcome the important steps that both of these countries are making, Mr. President, in the direction of recognizing Israel and moving embassies to Jerusalem, as you have done. The good book says, blessed are the peacemakers. And Mr. President, I think the American people, people of Serbia, people of Kosovo that are looking on know that there are three peacemakers here, and we've made an important step with this economic agreement toward lasting peace in the Balkans. I want to congratulate them, and I want to congratulate you, Mr. President, on your leadership that brought us to this historic day.
Thank you, Mike, very much. I'd like to have a really great senator, Ron Johnson, Wisconsin. And you have a lot of people from Serbia and Kosovo living in your state, and you were a big part of it. So thank you, Ron, very much. Would you like to say something?
Well, first of all, this is a really big deal. I could not be happier for people of Kosovo and Serbia. This was a brilliant strategy. Now, I've been involved. I've made multiple trips to both Kosovo and Serbia. And by the way, if you go, you will find what fantastic hosts the folks from Kosovo and Serbia are. But this has taken real political courage. This is not easy. As much as we can say, well, what's the big deal? This is a really big deal. But it really was the leadership shown by President Vučić, Prime Minister of Kosovo. The beauty of focusing on economics is that their people will see the benefit and they will be able to overcome and take the next step. This is a big day for, I think, stability in the Balkans as well. So again, I'm just glad to be here to see the culmination of this. And I just want to congratulate everybody involved, but in particular, I want to congratulate the people of Kosovo and Serbia. America is your friend, and we want nothing but the best for the people of Kosovo and Serbia.
And you have a very good tennis player playing right now in the US Open, right?
The best in the world. By far the best in the world. Number one.
Djokovic.
Yes.
Djokovic. He's a great player.
Yes, and many NBA players.
Yes, you
Many NBA
do.
players. Yes, yes. And very good players, as a matter of fact.
They're all as tall as you are,
Yep.
even a little bit taller, maybe.
Yes.
Well, we want to thank you both, and this has been really terrific. Would you have any other questions for the Prime Minister or the President?
We want to ask you about the economy if we can a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
So on the economy today, obviously, there's 1.4 million jobs
Right.
that were added. At this pace, though, it'll still take a full year before all the jobs lost before the pandemic are regained. Is that good enough?
I think what's happening is you're going to see tremendous growth in the very near future. We're rounding the curve. We're coming up with vaccines. I think the vaccines are going to be announced very soon. And I think you're going to see great companies announcing these vaccines. I spoke with Pfizer today. I speak with the different companies, Johnson & Johnson, as you know, doing really well. Moderna, we have tremendous talent, tremendous scientists, and they're really right there. And I think you're going to hear some very good news. And also, to me, maybe even better, I think when it comes to therapeutics, you're going to have some incredible news coming out very soon. I say therapeutics because that's you walk into the hospital, and whether it's a transfusion or a shot, people get better. That's something that I think right now is really incredible. The numbers are way down, as you know. Florida is doing very well. Arizona's been actually a little bit of a miracle how quickly it went down, because it went up and it went down very quickly. Two really great governors. Texas, great governor, same thing. California, the numbers are way down. So we're really starting to see those areas that popped up are really going down. The mortality rates, you look at the percentages, what's happening, and that's because of the convalescent plasma. It's because of the remdesivir. It's for a lot of different reasons, but we do have therapeutics that are really having an impact, and you're looking at what's going on. I've seen numbers from 50 to 85% better. So that's really something. So we're very proud of the job we're doing. And I think in particular, not only the great companies, but the companies, every one of them has said to me, if this was a more typical kind of presidency, I'll be nice. If this was a more typical kind of president, getting these approvals would take 2 or 3 years. And they'll have them, I mean, as far as we're concerned, they're very close to announcing some very big news. So we're honored by that. And I've had a team, whether it's Vice President Mike Pence, head of the task force, and all of the people on the task force, and they've really done a great job. I don't think they've been recognized for the great job they've done. And last night I read out in Pennsylvania, Latrobe, the home of the great Arnold Palmer. But I read out some statistics on how we're doing compared to other parts of the world, and we're doing phenomenally well. And if you took New York, because New York was just really, they made a lot of mistakes in New York. But if you took that out, the tremendous number of deaths in New York, if you took that out, our numbers are just about as good as anybody in the world. And even without that, without taking it out, you see the kind of numbers we have. So we've done a good job. We've done a great job in helping governors. I think every governor is very happy. Not everybody expresses it to the media, but they do at the task force meetings. We've had task force meetings where they're laying praise on us, and then they'll go out and talk to the press, and they won't be quite as generous, but that's okay. But for the most part, I think we've helped. In every case, we've helped every governor, and we've helped them a lot. And some of them we've made look very good, and some have done a really great job, and others haven't. But as a country, we have really done a terrific job, and I want to thank Vice President Pence. But I won't thank too much right now, because we like to get the job finished first. And the vaccines are going to come out soon, and the therapeutics are continuing, and that's why we're having the kind of numbers we have. And I'll be doing a news conference today at 5 o'clock, so I'll see you there, okay?
Sir, do you need to apologize to service members and veterans?
No, it was a fake story written by a magazine that was probably not going to be around much longer, but it was a totally fake story, and that was confirmed by many people who were actually there. It was a terrible thing that somebody could say the kind of things, and especially to me, because I've done more for the military than almost anybody else. You look at how the VA is doing, it's doing incredibly well. We got all sorts of things done, from accountability to veterans' choice to everything. And it's got right now the highest approval rating that it's ever had, 91% approval rating. It's never been anywhere close to that. Nobody's done what I've done, and that includes salary increases, but it really includes the rebuilding of our military, because as you know, when I came here, our military was totally depleted, and we spent almost $2.5 trillion, much more than you spent on your military, I can tell you that, right? Slightly more. $2.5 trillion, all made in the USA, F-35s, brand new jets and rockets and missiles, and hope to God that we never have to use it, but our nuclear is now in extraordinary shape, including new weapons. I just hope we never have to use that, because that's a level of power that you don't even want to talk about. You don't even want to hear about it. So it's a fake story, and it's a disgrace that they're allowed to do it. And very interestingly, I hate to bring up his book, but John Bolton, no friend of mine, I thought he was, didn't know too much about what he was doing. He didn't do a good job, but he wrote a book, and he talks about this incident, and he doesn't mention it. And frankly, a lot of reporters, even some pretty bad ones, they read that, and that was the end of the story. There's nobody that considers the military, and especially people that have given their lives in the military, to me, they're heroes. To me, they're heroes. It's even hard to believe how they could do it. And I say that. It's so the level of bravery. And to me, they are absolute heroes. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Mr. President, about people who were captured.
We're going, we're done. Peter, thank you.
All right, so you heard that President Trump will be having a news conference 5 p.m. Eastern. Of course, we will bring that to you right here on News Now from Fox. You're watching News Now right here, and we are awaiting Joe Biden to make some announcements on the economy. We will listen to hear what he has to say coming up as soon as he gets to the podium. Thank you so much for always joining us here on News Now from Fox. You could always check us out at newsnowfox.com.
Okay, stations. Angela, channel 1.
My name is Gassi Mikayedian, and today we are talking about how food and eating has been affected by the pandemic, and a great way to get your little ones to branch out of just plain old chicken nuggets every night. So I'm excited to welcome to this conversation Kenji Lopez Alf in San Mateo, California. You are the chef co-owner of the...
Hi, everyone. I'm Fox 35's Amy Kaufel in Orlando. A new report from the CDC reveals 94% of people who died from COVID-19 in the U.S. also had underlying conditions as a contributing cause. The agency says only 6% of deaths were just from the virus itself. And joining us right now is Dr. Jason Littleton. He is a board-certified family physician located in Orlando. Good to see you, doctor. How are you?
I'm doing great. Wonderful to talk with you, Amy.
So let me get your thoughts when you first heard that number, that 6% number versus the 94% of people who had the underlying conditions.
When I first heard that, immediately it told me that, healthy people are not succumbing to COVID-19. And when we look through the data, we see that people who are succumbing to COVID-19 are people who have one or two comorbidities. And that's a big deal. So it really tells us that the health of our population really tells us who can sustain COVID-19, who may not get COVID-19, and who may succumb to that.
Doc, there was a lot of talk in this breakdown by the CDC about those underlying conditions. And many Americans do fall into those categories. Can you sort of break that down for us?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is that people who get the flu, who have pneumonia frequently, people who have respiratory failure, COPD, people who have heart disease, CAD, heart failure, cardiac arrest, these are people who are more susceptible. Now, some of these things can be caused, actually are triggered by COVID-19. They were underlying conditions, but COVID-19 can actually act as a trigger for these and make these deteriorate. Not just that, or it can act as kind of the last straw thing and kind of be a weight and a burden on people who have these chronic conditions. But not just that, people who have succumbed to that, when we've looked at the death certificates, sometimes they actually passed away because of the heart failure or the respiratory failure or the diabetes. And COVID-19 was on the death certificate, so it looks as if COVID-19 was the main cause for their death, when it could have been some of those other conditions. So it's interesting. We have to weed through the data. We have to read through the facts. And but this brings new light that helping people do not succumb to COVID-19. And so for the majority of the people who are in the workforce, who are back to school, this is good news for people who want to get back to school and get back to work.
Well, Doc, as you know, there's been a lot of controversy over how these deaths have been reported. Many people saying that they felt like the numbers were purposefully inflated. Does this breakdown help to sort of get rid of some of that scrutiny?
Well, I think it might increase the scrutiny, because I think, what's happening is people will look at this, and to a degree, I think they should. They'll look at this and say, wait a minute, when we break it down, only 9,683 people actually died of COVID-19 without any other diagnosis. And that's a very small number when we look at the totality of people who succumb to the disease. So when we look at this, we're seeing that, people may have been found to be diagnosed with COVID-19, but they were going to die from renal failure. They were going to die from vascular dementia, or they were going to die from cardiac arrest. So I think people are going to look at this and have some questions like, why were we so alarmed in some respects? Because people get the flu every year, people get COVID-19 every year. So I think there's more explaining that needs to happen here.
If you are someone who's looking at those lists of underlying conditions, right, and you're like, oh, well, I have that or I have that, many of these conditions, things like diabetes, are things that are reversible. What advice would you give as a doctor to those folks?
Right now, I would tell people, not to panic, but get with your doctor, get with your health trainer or health provider, and work on a plan so you can improve your health risk. What you want to do is, and I have an acronym I tell people all the time, is move, eat, train, sleep. You want to get back to exercise, eating organically, eating healthy, drinking good water, and getting good sleep. Because when we do this, this helps reduce your health risk in so many ways, not just that, it'll help you lose weight. And we know obesity is one of the comorbidities that people have had that show as much as a 50% increase as far as mortality and morbidity when it comes to COVID-19 related deaths.
Doc, as we start to move into this possibility that Florida will move into phase 3 and that folks might be out and about more, what advice do you give them to still stay safe?
I still tell people to social distance. I still tell people to wear a mask. I still tell people that if they're traveling on airplanes or any type of public transportation, to wipe the surfaces down. People have to remember that you want to protect yourself. Even beyond the pandemic, you want to protect yourself, because as we enter flu season, again, COVID-19 numbers are going down, but we're getting into flu season, and so that can complicate things. So I'm telling people, stay safe, exercise, eat well, treat your body well, wipe things down, social distance, and at all costs, let your health provider know if you have any questions about other things that you can do to stay safe based on your personal medical history.
And as we do start to enter into flu season, what is your advice to folks about that?
I want people to get the flu shot. I think that the best time to get the flu shot, and the CDC also agrees, is at the end of September, October, because this will help people with better protection as we get into the height of flu season around December, January. It's very important people do that this year. I think with COVID-19, people are going to wonder every time that they have an upper respiratory infection or fever or chills, do they have COVID-19? Or do they have the flu? And I think this is where we have to really screen people. And I just recommend, because we don't have a vaccine right now for COVID-19, get the flu vaccine and do the best that you can to work with your health provider so you can stay healthy and you can stay in shape.
Doc, what are your thoughts now that the kids are back in school? We know that there's a lot of germ sharing going on. Do you feel enough is being done to try to protect everybody?
I do. I think no one's ever perfect. We're not perfect as a society in terms of, trying to squash every microbe and trying to protect every single, limit every single risk that we can. But I think schools they're working their best. I mean, my child right now is in school, and when I drop my daughter off, I look at what they've done. They have, shields in front of every desk. Everyone's wearing masks. Right now they're not even letting parents come into school unless it's like an emergency. They have specific plans in place so that they can limit contact, not only with adults, but also with children, so we can keep people safe. And that makes me feel safe as a parent. Again, no one's perfect, but I think it's important for people to get back to work and back to school. And I think this attempt that a lot of schools and a lot of counties are making to get people back to school, I think it's a great attempt, because this is the first time. This is unprecedented. And, we have to see in retrospect how things go, but I feel secure and safe as a parent. And I think this is a great attempt at what we're doing.
All right. Well, I know you'll be pleased to know my little guy came home from school the other day and he says, Mom, I've never washed my hands that much before. I mean, like all the time, all day long. See, we're making progress with them, Doc. We're making progress.
I agree totally. I do. I mean, I just think that I just think that the kids are doing a great job, really just complying with what the teachers ask them to do, what the parents ask them to do, so that they can, stay sanitized and just stay in great health. And they may not understand all the ramifications. They may not understand what COVID-19 is, but they're doing the best that they can to limit risk. And I think that's great.
Absolutely. And they sure adapt better than adults, don't they? That's one thing we've definitely
They do. They do. And a lot of times they're the healthiest.
That's right. That's right. Dr. Littleton, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your advice this morning.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for the interview.
News now from Fox. Experience breaking news as it occurs. A front row seat to news happening right now. News now from Fox.
Hey there, everyone. Mike Meeback with KTVU Fox 2 in the San Francisco Bay Area. We're talking coronavirus and real estate, and we're lucky enough to have Vanessa Bergmark, CEO of Red Oak Realty, join us for the conversation. Vanessa's in Oakland, California right now. What are we experiencing right now, Vanessa? I'll just kind of throw it wide open. People are moving out of the big cities, not just in the Bay Area, but across the country, I guess, and looking for land, space out there in the suburbs.
Yep. Well, thanks so much for having me, first of all. So yeah, what we are seeing is basically a confluence of events come together. It's like the trifecta. And frankly, the fires right now are adding a whole other level to what's going on with real estate. But what we had was incredibly high prices, a huge demand at the beginning of the year, and that's after years of incredibly expensive, high cost of living in the Bay Area. Couple that with this pandemic, where we were, sheltered in place in counties across the Bay Area that took a very hard stance and were some of the, earliest in the nation to shut down. Sure. And then you have the reopening of that, and still, I think a lot of, county mandates that change sort of the way that we are living right now. Bars, restaurants, nightclubs, events, all the things that drive city living, urban living, have been stripped away practically overnight, and they're not making a resurgence just yet. So couple that with what will the fall look like? How long will this pandemic continue? And you're starting to see what has been whispered about, and now is starting to come to fruition, which is a push out of the urban areas and into suburbs and really truly rural areas as well.
Yeah, let's talk about inventory, because if you told me back in January that the city of San Francisco was going to have a 96% increase in inventory, housing inventory, that according to Zillow, I wouldn't have believed you as someone who grew up in the Bay Area, but that's a big number, Vanessa. Would you agree or no?
It's a really big number, and I think what it is part of that number right now is people having the time to say, wait a second, if I really don't have to work in the city and commute, because part of the, we've got these prices, but we've also got traffic.
You've got like Google's and Facebook saying, hey, you don't have to come back for a year, right?
And then they're setting a precedence that other companies are saying, well, is it a liability if I don't fall in line? So You're starting to see what is becoming sort of like, there's an imitation factor going on of like, well, if they're going to do it, then I'm going to do it. Then you have an entire opportunity that never existed before. You have, for the first time in the history of working, that you don't have to live where you work. So if that's the case, all bets are off. You could go home to family, you could go back somewhere, you could try the mountains, you could try anything, because if your company is allowing you to keep your job, keep your employment, and use technology and go somewhere else, everyone's having a different conversation with their, significant other or their families or their children of what would we do now and what could we try?
Yeah.
So that's changing.
What about inventory are you seeing? And I know you're in Oakland. I mean, you have San Jose, San Francisco, Oakland, big cities there in the Bay Area. What are you seeing in regards to inventory beyond you, like through the Katt'z Tunnel, Walnut Creek? I mean, I know it's huge in the big cities.
Everyone seems to be pushing, like, it's like one step forward for everyone. So if you're in Palo Alto, there's people. So first of all, what we are seeing is that inventory was started the year down 30%. Then it was moving up slowly. It plummeted 53% in May in the Oakland East Bay market, 53%. Now it's shot up, it's 5% up year over year. And we're starting to see more and more inventory come on. That could be a lot of things. It's the work from home becoming a real true reality. It's the election, it's the fires. There's a lot of things now. It's like one thing on top of the other that's pushing people forward to make decisions.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is everyone seems to be going, maybe it's like one county out or one city. Right now, we are getting a lot of people leaving San Francisco that are coming to the East Bay, just for the mere fact of yards, better weather, less commute, right? The ability to go somewhere else, but not wanting to totally leave the Bay Area. So a lot of movement to Napa, Sonoma counties. There's a push from the East Bay to those counties.
Even Lake Tahoe, right? I mean, I saw
Tahoe's huge.
Yeah, I saw an article in the Chronicle. I don't know if it was over the weekend or maybe it was this week, but that someone from San Francisco knocked on the door, someone in Truckee up in Lake Tahoe, and said, "I want to buy your house." And the person's like, "No." They're like, $2 million. And the person's like, "No." But I mean, it's gotten to that point where you have these people who have, a lot of money in their homes in San Francisco that can do that, I guess. They can just walk up to someone and say, "Hey, I want your house right now."
Well, and let's look at this. We've got historically low interest rates, and they are going to stay low. When you're looking at 2.75 to 3.25% on $1.5 million or $2 million loan, that's when are you going to be able to see? I mean, if people really look at what's going on right now, there's an opportunity that is quite golden. In the midst of fires, pandemics, right? In the midst of all this chaos, there are some really good opportunities. And I don't think that the San Francisco Bay area is going to cease to exist after this. I just think there's an opening. There was a pressure. There's a lot of moving forces. And again, it's the companies that will make a decision that will really change the face of the area for a while, which is, will they demand that they come back, or will they continue with this trend and let them work from anywhere?
What do you think?
I think they're probably going to continue with the trend. And I think it's a good thing for our nation. I think it's a good thing for people to move and repopulate and go into other cities. I also think maybe summer in Austin and a winter in Montana might have people running back to the Bay Area. So we've got to get through a whole season of things before we can really say, is this permanent?
Is there risk though? I mean, is there risk when it comes to someone who, let's say, lives in the suburbs and they would make a lot of money on the sale of their house, and maybe.
And let's go out live right now to Delaware, where we do have Joe Biden about to make remarks on the economy.
Sorry, I'm a little late. I was sort of mesmerized. I was walking out of the office listening to an interview of former General Barry McCaffrey and Bill Cohen, former Secretary of Defense. And before I begin, I want to speak a little bit to what they talked about and the revelations about President Trump's disregard for our military and our veterans. Quite frankly, if what is written in the Atlantic is true, it's disgusting. And it affirms what most of us believe to be true. That Donald Trump is not fit to be the job of president, to be the commander-in-chief. The president reportedly said, and I emphasize reportedly said, that those who sign up to serve instead of doing something more lucrative are suckers. Let me be real clear. When my son was an assistant U.S. attorney and he volunteered to go to Kosovo while the war was going on as a civilian, he wasn't a sucker. When my son volunteered and joined the United States military as the Attorney General and went to Iraq for a year, won the Bronze Star and other commendations, he wasn't a sucker. The servicemen and women he served with, particularly those who did not come home, were not losers. If these statements are true, the president should humbly apologize to every Gold Star mother and father and every Blue Star family that he's denigrated and insulted. Who the heck does he think he is? Is it true Well, we've heard from his own mouth his characterizations of an American hero, John McCain, as a loser in 2015. Donald Trump said he was not a war hero. I like people who weren't captured. Well, good for him. And his dismissal of the traumatic brain injuries suffered by troops serving in Iraq as mere headaches not too long ago. He stood by, failing to take action or even raise the issue with Vladimir Putin, while the Kremlin puts bounties on the heads of American troops in Afghanistan. It's a sacred duty. And you're tired of hearing me say this. Those who've been covering me for years know I get in trouble for saying, but I'm going to say it again. We have many obligations as a government. We only have one truly sacred obligation. Equip and support those who we send into harm's way, care for their families while they're gone, and care for them when they are home. That's the only truly sacred obligation the government has. Duty, honor, country. These are values that drive our service members. It's an all-voluntary outfit. President Trump has demonstrated he has no sense of service, no loyalty to any cause other than himself. If I have the honor of being the next commander-in-chief, I will ensure that our American heroes know I'll have their backs, honor their sacrifice, and those who've been injured will be in military parades. I'm always cautioned not to lose my temper. This may be as close as I've come this campaign. It's just a marker of how deeply President Trump and I disagree about the role of the President of the United States of America. You know, the August jobs report came out this morning. I'm grateful for everyone who found work again and found a glimmer of hope that brings them back from the edge. But there is real cause for concern as well. The pace of the job gains in August was slower than July, significantly slower than in May and June. More and more temporary layoffs are turning into permanent layoffs. 28 million people have filed for unemployment. And after 6 months in the pandemic, we're less than halfway back to where we were, with 11.5 million Americans not getting their jobs back. We're still down 720,000 manufacturing jobs. In fact, Donald Trump may be the only president in modern history to leave office with fewer jobs than when he took office. I talked to a lot of real working people. Ask them. They feel like they're being left behind. Ask them, how do they feel about the economy coming back? You'll find they don't feel it. And that's why I'm here today, to thank Paul Calistro and his team for hosting us at West End Neighborhood House here in Wilmington. Paul, your continued tradition of doing God's work for this community is important. This has been around for more than 130 years. Through pandemics, wars, depressions, West End has been here for generations of people. We're just looking for a chance, not a handout. Just a fair shot at a good job, a safe place to live, and a better life to pass down to their kids. This is a special place for the Biden family. My daughter, Ashley, a social worker, was a caseworker here, helping young people who are aging out of foster care. When my son was the Attorney General, Bo came here, right here, to learn more about job training programs for those working toward a GED and a certificate for a good-paying job. When I was senator and vice president, there were plenty of economists I had around me to talk about every aspect of the economy. But I always think about the people who walk through the doors here, working people, white, black, brown, Latino. What are they doing? Are they okay? I knew if they're okay, as they walked through these doors, the economy was doing okay. If they weren't okay, we weren't doing well. That's what we should be thinking about, this latest jobs report. But the report reinforces the worst fears and painful truths. The economic inequities that began before the downturn have only worsened under this failed presidency. When the crisis started, we all hoped for a few months of a shutdown would be followed by a rapid economic turnaround. No one thought they'd lose their job for good or see small businesses shut down en masse. But that kind of recovery requires leadership. Leadership we didn't have and still don't have. And as a result, economists are starting to call this recession a K-shaped recession, which is a fancy phrase for what's wrong with everything about Trump's presidency. The K means those at the top are seeing things go up, and those in the middle and below are seeing things go down and get worse. It's no surprise because at root of this is the fact that Trump has mismanaged the COVID crisis. Why it's a K-shaped pandemic. First, the president's chaotic mismanagement of the pandemic is still holding us back. Compared to other major industrial countries in Europe and Asia, during the pandemic, our unemployment rate is still more than double, while other nations have only gone up by half. Why? Because the president has botched the COVID response, botched it badly. I've said from the beginning, we can't deal with an economic crisis until you beat the pandemic. You can't have an economic comeback when almost 1,000 Americans die each day from COVID, when the death toll has reached about 200,000. When more than 6 million Americans have been infected, when a million more worry about getting sick and dying as schools and businesses try to reopen. We all know it didn't have to be this bad. It didn't have to be this bad to begin with if the president just did his job. If he just took the virus seriously early on in January and February as it spread around the globe, if he just took the steps we needed back in March and April to institute widespread testing and tracing to control the virus, if he provided clear national scientific-based guidance to state and local authorities, if he just set a good example like social distancing and wearing a mask, it's not too much to ask. But it's almost like he doesn't care. He doesn't affect him because it doesn't affect him or his class of friends. Anyone with a big enough checkbook can get rapid tests on demand. If you don't, you might have to wait in line for hours and wait for weeks to get your result, if you can get them at all. If you have the kind of job where you can work from a laptop at home remotely, risking getting COVID is very small at work. This job report shows that 37 million people reported teleworking in August. But if you work in an assembly line, or checkout counter, or a meatpacking plant, or drive a truck, or deliver packages, you're at much greater risk. And the job report shows that more than 27 million workers reported that they couldn't work or lost hours because their employer had to close or lost business due to the pandemic. If you can hire a private tutor or have a live-in childcare, you can balance being a parent and remote schooling. If you can't, you have to do your job and be a teacher all at once. Jill and I have held briefings on reopening of school safety 2 days ago. Asking the question is, we hear so many parents call and ask us, educators as well, who feel like they're in an impossible situation. What are they supposed to do with our children when the president has made it so hard for schools to reopen safely? What's the alternative when it's devastating to keep them isolated from their friends and their support systems? I also said earlier this week to the shock of many, that we lost more cops this year to COVID than on patrol. It's a reminder how an already dangerous job, law enforcement, has gotten more dangerous because of Trump's mismanagement. What may be just as shocking is many other jobs have also become dangerous due to COVID. Being a healthcare worker, more than ever. We've lost hundreds of them this year because they weren't protected from COVID on the job. Being a meat packer is more dangerous than ever. So many have died due to getting COVID at work. Work for waitresses and waiters and transit workers, all have become more dangerous with so many dying of COVID. Ladies and gentlemen, no matter what he says or what he claims, you are not safer in Donald Trump's America. You're not safe in Donald Trump's America, where people are dying at a rate last seen when Americans were fighting in World War II. Donald Trump's malpractice during this pandemic has made being a working American a life or death work. And while there's a disproportionate impact on Black, Latino, and Asian Americans and Native Americans working class communities, white working class communities are being hit hard as well. Opioid deaths, for example, are up during the pandemic, another crisis that Trump continues to all but ignore. In the meantime, Trump and his friends have strong views about what the rest of America should do. Quote, cut unemployment benefits to force people to go back to their jobs, end of quote. Defund Social Security and eliminate Obamacare in the middle of a pandemic, end of quote. Reopen public schools without resources or guidance. Reopen Main Street business without protection for workers so corporations can continue to soar. This is their plan. Second, and similarly, the economic pain remains unrelenting for millions of working people of every race and background who aren't getting relief they need. Meanwhile, wealthy are doing just fine, some better than ever. This divergence in fortunes is unique to any recession in recent memory. And the painful truth is, we just have a president who just doesn't see it. He doesn't feel it. He doesn't understand. He just doesn't care. He thinks if the stock market is up, then everything's fine. If his wealthy friends and donors are doing well, then everything's doing well. If corporations see their valuations rising, then they must be hiring. But the best economists know what I know. I've learned growing up in Scranton and Claymont, Delaware, up the road, places where folks aren't invested in the market like wealthy Americans. A measure of our economic success is the quality of life of the American people. And if your stock soars, families teeter on the brink of hunger and homelessness, and our president calls that success, what does that say about what he values? When you see the world in such a narrow prism, it's no wonder he doesn't see nearly 30 million Americans on unemployment. 1 in 6 small businesses that are closed right now. He doesn't understand what life is like for people walking by their boarded up shops. Educators afraid that doing their job, that job they love, will bring the virus home to the people they love. Or a parent searching for health insurance now that the furlough has turned into a layoff. It's no wonder he doesn't see the single mom forced to wait in a 3-hour food line. So for the first time in her life, so she can feed her family, because she's now part of the 1 in 6 households with children that don't have enough to eat. He wants us to believe that we're doing better, to keep it up and not notice that this remains the worst economic situation since the Great Depression. And our country faced a historic divergence in our way of life. Which gets me to my third and final point, and what the American people really need to understand. All the pain and suffering stems from President Trump's failure to lead. his sheer inability and unwillingness to bring people together. He likes to sign executive orders, actions for photo ops, but they're ill-conceived and could do more harm than good. He says protecting renters from eviction. That's what he's doing. But he's not giving them any support to pay the rent when it comes due. Millions of Americans will only be left with the terrible choice between eviction and living in the streets or paying back rent they simply don't have, when there was an answer offered and rejected. He says he's continuing to provide enhanced unemployment insurance payments, but he cut the amount that everyone on it received, leaves them on the edge when it runs out in a few weeks or sooner. He should be doing his job of calling congressional leaders together immediately to get a deal and deliver real results for the American people. This is the first president in the middle of a crisis I've never seen has called Congress into the Oval Office. If I were president, that's what I'd do, and I'd get it done like previous presidents. Rentals, food, unemployment assistance, tens of millions of struggling Americans, student loan relief, small business support, and aid to schools and state governments that are going bankrupt. And as long as this pandemic and the accompanying economic catastrophe persist, no one should have their water or power cut off because they can't afford to pay the bill. Bottom line, Mr. President, do your job. Get off your golf course and out of the sand bunker. Call the leaders together in the Oval Office. Sit with them and make a deal. Make a deal that delivers for working Americans and eases their anxiety and pain. In July, I laid out my Build Back Better plan for an economy that works for everyone. Over the next 3 weeks, I'll be laying out the sharp contrast my plan has with the president's non-plans. I'll be asking the American people 3 basic questions. Who can handle the pandemic? Who can keep their promises? And who cares about and will fight for working families? Like the people here at West End, throughout this pandemic, they found their way to keep the center open safely and provide for critical services. No one here has been laid off. They adjusted their spaces for social distancing. They started a lending program to help local businesses, hair salons, and other small businesses. They continued their child care services, which is critical for so many working families. By pure courage, heart, and grit, they never give up and they never give in as to pursue the full promise for America. That's the story of the people of this community and this country. That's who we are. Give ordinary Americans just half a chance, and they never let the country down. They'll do extraordinary things. They'll never let us down, unlike the current president. And unlike the current president, I won't let you down either. That's what this election is about. Helping people unite, get together, move this country back in the direction that we can be. There's nothing beyond our capacity. Nothing. If we just do it together. Thank you all, and I now take your questions. I guess, are you calling on people, or how am I don't have a list, so you go ahead and call.
Thank you, sir. This morning, in reference to that article in The Atlantic, in a call convened by your campaign, Khizr Khan said that the comments demonstrated that President Trump's life is a testament to selfishness, and that his soul is that of a coward. You've talked about this as a different view of how you see the job as president, but when you hear these remarks, suckers, losers, recoiling from amputees, what does it tell you about President Trump's soul and the life he leads?
I'm going to try to be measured in my response. If it's true, and based on other things he said, I believe the article is true, I'd ask you all the rhetorical question. How do you feel? How would you feel if you had a kid in Afghanistan right now? How would you feel if you lost a son, daughter, husband, wife, how would you feel for real? I know that's not your job to express that feeling, but you know in your heart, you know in your gut, it's deplorable. It's deplorable. As I've said many times, I'll say again, these folks are the backbone of America. They're the heart, the soul, the grit. That's what patriotism is about. I've just never been as disappointed in my whole career with a leader that I've worked with, president or otherwise, that if the article is true, and it appears to be based on other things he said, it is absolutely damnable. It is a disgrace.
Setsky, on a somewhat related topic, what would you say to the supporters of the QAnon, the people who believe in that conspiracy, what they think is true about America, that there's sex trafficking and a conspiracy against President Trump? And what would you say to President Trump for not rejecting that conspiracy and the people who believe in it?
I've been a big supporter of mental health. I'd recommend that people who believe it maybe should take advantage while it still exists in the Affordable Care Act. It's bizarre, totally bizarre. And now, have you guys found that plane load of people in uniforms and weapons and flying around? I mean, you know, have you found them yet? Is anybody even from, and by the way, I respect conservative and liberal points of view in the press. Anybody found that plane? What in God's name are we doing? Look at how it makes us look around the world. It's mortifying. It's embarrassing, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous. If the president doesn't know better, which he has to know better, then my Lord, we're in much more trouble than I ever thought we were. It's bizarre. And, you know, this is a case where, you know, I've been surprised, pleased but surprised, with folks I've had political arguments with, like the former governor of Michigan, coming out and endorsing me. All the Republicans are endorsing me. They're rich where I am. That this can't go on. I mean, this cannot go on. It's a deconstruction of a democratic system. They know it. So I just, basis.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. He asked you about another thing the president said last night. He once again suggested to his supporters that they should consider voting twice if they're in one of those states that can allow you to request an absentee ballot. Say, fill that out and then go try voting again in person. State officials have said it's a felony in some cases. Just curious what you make of it.
It is. It is a felony. You're a felony here in the state of Delaware. Look, I mean, how many times does this president have to suggest things and say things where you all don't just write, he's a fraud? Not an opinion. He wanted to, maybe we should delay the election. Maybe we should, write-in ballots are fraudulent, not a single bit of evidence. It just is. And I think it's all designed to create so much chaos that no matter what the outcome of the election is, that it's thrown up in the air. I think that must be his reason, because, he says and does things that no other president that I'm aware of in American history has ever done.
You gotta watch the image you put out that beach.
And we all go, well,
So it's just like,
there's another ridiculous,
it's a lot
illegal,
of brown
inappropriate thing he said, but we've said so many of them.
Like,
it doesn't matter. It is, it just undermines the legitimacy of our democratic process. And it's dangerous.
You said today is the angriest you've been as a presidential candidate. But you said you're trying to restrain yourself. There are a lot of people out there who are supporting you or are inclined to not vote for the president who would say, why isn't Joe Biden angrier about all of this?
Because presidents of the United States should be presidential and should lead by example, as well as make clear exactly where they stand. Getting down in the gutter like the president does, saying things that I'd be inclined, if we were behind a barn somewhere, would be a different thing. But that's not the job of a president. The job of a president is to set an example. My anger is real because I must tell you, I carry, and I deliberately didn't bring with me today, Delaware National Guard had a pin made up. That's a gold star that was made up for my son, Bo, who didn't die in the field. And I always carry it with me. And I didn't carry it today because I was worried that if I focused too much on it, that I would engage in some of the kind of language the president has used. But I just think it is sick. It is deplorable. It is so un-American. It is so unpatriotic. And then watching him this morning, while I was shaving and the TV on, talking about he never said anything like that. He honored John McCain. He's the reason why flags were flown at half-mast. Oh, wasn't that noble of him? He's the same guy that when the ship went into harbor, he made sure the USS McCain was covered. You couldn't see it. He's the same guy that denigrated John. He's the same guy who did a similar thing where he talked about George H.W. Bush, who was shot down in the Pacific. But he just stands there. It's almost pathological. I've never said anything like that. No one's been better to the military. I just got to focus on what has to be done, not what he did, what I do from here, what gets done from here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. If I could follow up on Ed's question about voting. We know the president has been attacking mail-in voting. He's even now suggesting his supporters vote twice. We also know that Russia has been trying to sow doubt about this system. Are you concerned at all that this messaging may be working, that your supporters may give up on voting by mail because they're concerned that it may be rigged?
Yes, I am. That's why I try not to talk about it too much, because we're playing, the more we talk about, there's two things he wants us to talk about. Is the election legitimate? And the whole country's up in flames. Everything's burning. Law and order. Because he doesn't want to talk about anything at all about the job he hasn't done. And so it's a conundrum. There's a lot we could talk about in terms of the specifics that Russia is doing and not doing. But when you do, all it does is undermine what people think may be the legitimate. What I don't want to have happen, I don't want people reaching the point where you can understand sometimes it's not worth voting. You know, it seems to me that one of the things that I keep trying to say to people is go to iwillvote.com. Figure out iwillvote.com and figure out where you can vote, how you can vote, what's available to you, where you can vote early, where you can vote in person, where it's going to be safe for you, etc. Plan now. Plan now. But the more chaos that is sown here, it's going to disincline people to show up. And in a sense, every time I speak about it, I feel like I'm playing at his game. I mean, is that, not do you agree with me, but does it make sense what I'm saying? That's what so I think that's all part of the deal.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Going back to the jobless report from this morning, you had acknowledged that less than half of the 22 million jobs that were lost this spring because of the pandemic have been recovered. What do you think the 1.4 million added back in August says about just the general direction of the economy?
I think any job added back is positive. I think it matters to the people who got that job back. You know, maybe you all were raised in households like I was, where the mom or dad was losing a job because of the economy, what's going on in your community. You could feel the tension, unease in the household, how it just everything, you know, worrying about whether you can provide for your family. And along the way, also look at the people who you've got, you know, a couple million people out there, close to, who are part-time workers who still can't make it, but are listed as employed. And a lot of them also are in the process of wondering whether or not, I mean, there are a lot of people lined up in food lines. They're the people, many of them, who have lost their health care, their health care provided by their employer. They're the same people who are out there worrying, if this president is able to win in court and wipe out the entire Affordable Care Act and all the 100 million people with pre-existing conditions won't be able to get insurance even if they had the money. And I mean, it's just the anxiety is enormous, And look, again, I'm not being solicitous. Among the brightest people I've dealt with my whole career have been the press. Not a joke. You're all extremely well educated. You're well read, have significant backgrounds. And the vast majority have tried to report the news, not just opinion. But I can't believe that you don't feel the same, not Democrat, Republican, okay? You don't feel the same anxiety because you got a brother or a sister, a mother, a father, son or a daughter who's going through what you're not, what we're not. We have jobs. Well, I don't have a job now, but we have jobs. And so it's a real concern. And I just think that this has moved beyond Democrat, Republican. I think it's moved to trying to put this country back together again so we can move. I like to
President, if
engage.
I may ask, President Trump has just announced a Kosovo and Serbia deal, and as part, President Trump has just announced an economic normalization deal between Serbia and Kosovo. And part of that deal is Kosovo and Israel having diplomatic normalization. You have stated that you support a two-state solution in the Middle East. Would you support more Muslim majority countries normalizing relations with Israel, even though it may mean that the Palestinians will lose leverage in their fight towards a two-state solution?
Well, first of all, I don't know what the deal is you're referring to, okay? What I have argued relative to Serbia and Kosovo is that Kosovo should be an independent country, not a part of Serbia. I've spent a lot of time there. And so I don't know how, I assume that would reinforce that independence, but I don't know based on what's being said. I think normalization of relations among countries is by and large, in almost every instance, a good thing. To have a Muslim majority country normalizing relations with Israel in a generic sense seems positive to me, but I have to know the detail of what's happening, what's going on. And I don't know that, and you may be right, that would cause the Palestinians to lose leverage in a decision on a two-state solution.
In
I'd have to
general,
look
do
at
you
it.
support more countries recognizing Israel?
Oh, I do. Absolutely, I do. I do. And I think that's the thing, recognizing Israel as an independent Jewish state. I think that's important. And, but also, I believe that Israel has to be prepared to work toward a genuine two-state solution. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
And that was the full Joe Biden news conference there and remarks in Delaware on this Friday. As he continues to still talk to the media here, let's listen. All right, he's wrapping up there, going to put on his mask there. You are watching News Now from Fox. Welcome everyone here to News Now from Fox. I'm your host, Mike Page. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It's a busy Friday, as you can see right here, and you can always get coverage and find out where to watch News Now from Fox. There's a lot of options. You can find it right there at newsnowfox.com. Take a look right now. Right now, we are waiting on a White House news briefing. We will bring that to you as soon as we get it here for you. Now let's go out to Dr. Mike, Fox 29, giving us updates on the COVID-19 pandemic.
Dr. Mike Srigliano with Penn Medicine joining us out of Philadelphia. Good to see you, Dr. Mike.
Always a pleasure, Thomas.
As we end the week, I want to get your assessment on where we are. Here we are 7 months into this pandemic.
Well, we're 7 months closer, Thomas, to better treatments and a vaccine. So yes, we are in a much better place now. However, our track record has not been all that stellar. There are reports that, hey, you know what? If people wore masks, we did a little bit of a better job. We could have saved lives. But as I tell people all the time, you can't go back. You can only go forward. So what we need to do now, with reports of better treatment options like dexamethasone and hydrocortisone and vaccine production coming along, we have to be very optimistic that we are getting closer to a day when we can say goodbye to COVID-19, at least on a grand scale. We may not say goodbye completely, but we can all get back to somewhat of a normal life.
And hopefully that will be soon. With the holiday weekend approaching, are you concerned about a spike in cases? Some people may be letting their guard down.
Well, with past track records, we know that when there's a holiday weekend, people tend to congregate. Now, it's not July 4th. A lot of the kids are very careful.
And we've seen these clusters among college students back to school here. There's a spike in cases. How concerned are you about the college environment?
Well, I'm very concerned about this, Thomas. And to be honest with you, it's really not the fault of young people. Young people are social beings. It's in their genetic makeup. And so the bottom line is that with opening colleges, you are going to see more cases, and they're getting tested a lot. That's another reason why you're seeing an uptick in cases. So in my humble opinion, I think that it may have been a bit premature to expect that we could go back now rather than be a little more cautious. That's my own humble opinion. And what we're seeing are many colleges that originally opened up just later, a week or two later, seeing an uptick in numbers and then closing. And that brings up this very important point. Dr. Fauci has said, well, wait a minute, if a test comes back positive on a college kid, what are they doing? Well, they close the school down and everybody goes home. That's not what he's recommending we do, because then the kid that's positive goes home and then can infect his family, goes back to the various states that they all come from, and then we're back in the hole. So there are some people who feel that if you are a college kid and you test positive, you stay there and you get through it while you are infectious, and then we talk about you going home.
Yeah, you don't want to be spreaders in your particular state. So most of us, as we talk about socializing, we're sticking to that hard, fast rule, stay 6 feet apart, but perhaps a reminder, a heavy cough, a sneeze can travel further.
Well, we've seen all this data, and some people have talked about 17 feet. The bottom line is if you wear a mask, you will reduce the amount of distance that you can spread this virus. So everyone has to wear a mask. And some studies show if you wear a good cloth mask with several layers of cotton, you can prevent that virus from spreading even more than a couple inches. So the bottom line is that 6 feet, social distancing, avoid large crowds, and wearing masks are really the way to go. If you do that, if all of us did that, there are some studies that show that we could save so many lives just by doing simple things like that. Good hand sanitizer use and soap and water. If you use good hygiene, we can really curb this virus to low levels.
If you do show mild symptoms of the virus, Dr. Mike, could you still contract a more severe form of the virus?
Well, certainly if you have mild symptoms, it may be that you're early on in your illness. And my experience has been that some people can go along for several days after being deemed positive, and then all of a sudden their oxygen levels go down. And that is thought to be due to this, what we call silent hypoxia. And that means their oxygen levels go down. And that could be an indicator that your immune system is really going into overdrive, causing this cytokine storm. And that's why I told people, and still do, have a little device called a pulse oximeter in your house to measure your oxygen levels. Because if they start to go down several days into this, you may need medical attention.
Give you that early warning. Is the data still showing us that 2 days prior to symptoms are the most contagious period?
Well, we know for a fact, Thomas, that people are very contagious, not only when they are symptomatic, but even before. And the reason they're contagious before, just like asymptomatic people that have the virus, they don't know it. And they tend to be spreading the virus unbeknownst to them that they even have the virus. So that's the kicker here, that many people who are asymptomatic can spread the virus and not even know it.
So once again, can you explain, because we hear the term symptomatic, asymptomatic, pre-symptomatic, what's the difference?
Well, asymptomatic people are folks who have the virus and they don't even know it. Good for them. The fact is, though, they can spread the virus. So that's asymptomatic. Pre-symptomatic are, just as we talked about, people who are early on in their infection, who have not yet exhibited symptoms. And remember, there is an incubation time of maybe 4 days or so before some people start to feel sick. And so they are pre-symptomatic. And then, of course, symptomatic just means people who have the virus, who have a cough, fever, loss of taste and smell, diarrhea, muscle aches, headache, all of the things we talked about. That's symptomatic.
So let's talk about the vaccine here. In hopes of a vaccine, we hear about the different phases of clinical trials. A number of labs have now entered phase 3. Can you tell us what that means and at what point does it gain approval?
Well, what we're doing is we are in the final stages of testing of these viruses, these vaccines. And again, a phase 3 trial involves 30,000 people. And what you want to do is you then can tell whether a vaccine is safe and whether it's effective. And those trials are ongoing. Some of them are midway. So the issue is then going to be when. When will a vaccine be ready? Well, some people are very optimistic. It could be early November. Personally, I don't think so. I think if we're going to do this right, we have to vet out all of these vaccines to make sure that they're safe and effective, and then we get the public started. Remember, Thomas, that as we've spoken, many people, even before all of this news, are concerned about the rapidity of getting this vaccine out to the public. And many of them have said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to get the vaccine, despite my risk of getting the virus. And so we've got to make sure that we are confident and that we have the confidence of our citizenry that this is the right thing to do, that these vaccines have been vetted out, they've been tested and shown to be safe and effective.
Yeah, some are certainly questioning the timeline. So you talk about the participants. Who exactly participates in these clinical trials, and can you still sign up?
Well, you can certainly still sign up. And there has been some criticism about are all aspects of our society, are all the minorities and people of color, are they being represented in these studies? And they have to be. And so all of us, if you have the inclination, you can be a volunteer and participate in one of these trials. Remember that we have to get at least 30,000 people in a phase 3 trial to really get an idea of whether something is safe and effective. But it really has to be across the board.
Yeah, represent the different groups there. There are some who say until we reach that.
All right, folks, we are going to the White House. White House news briefing underway.
Advisor Robert O'Brien and Senior Advisor Jared Kushner to talk to you about the history that was made here at the White House today, and then they'll take a few of your questions.
Thank you, Kaylee. Again, it was a great morning in the Oval Office with President Trump, President Vucic, and Prime Minister Hoti. We brought together through the hard work of great diplomats, primarily led by Rick Grinnell, acting at the president's direction, Serbia and Kosovo, and they've normalized their economic relations. This is the Serbia-Kosovo conflict has gone on for decades. They've been stuck, unable to move forward for many, many years. And the president some time ago decided that we needed to try something creative, try something new, break the deadlock, and try to move forward with the peace process with Serbia and Kosovo. To have the Prime Minister of Kosovo and the President of Serbia together in the Oval Office was something, given the history of those two countries and given the history of the United States with respect to Serbia and the conflict in the Balkans, is something that is quite remarkable. And to have this happen just in the shadow, a few days after Jared and I were on the flight from Ben Gurion Airport to Abu Dhabi International Airport, the first commercial flight between Israel and a Gulf Arab state. It shows the sort of momentum that's coming. One of the side benefits of the normalization of economic ties between Serbia and Kosovo was the establishment of diplomatic relations between Kosovo, a majority Muslim state, and the state of Israel. This is now the second time in less than a month that Israel has made peace with and has normalized its ties with a majority Muslim country. It's another really signal accomplishment of President Trump. The fact that this has happened on the heels of a peace agreement with the Taliban in Afghanistan that has happened in response, on the heels of last year negotiating a ceasefire between the Kurds and the Turks. You're seeing a pattern here of the president being a true peacemaker. And there's been plenty of criticism of the administration. But what's been interesting to me is as the president has undertaken these historic initiatives and brought together a team to perform and deliver these accomplishments, others have even tried to take credit. I was just watching the vice president, without making a political comment, the vice president was welcoming these moves today. But these things could only happen under a Trump administration and under the president's leadership, peace through strength, foreign policy, and national security policy. He put the pieces in place, and now we're reaping the peace dividend. And it's happened to the Balkans, it's happened to the Middle East, and we have more to come. I'll leave some of that to Senior Advisor Kushner to address in a moment. So with those opening comments, I want to turn the time over to the Special Envoy for Serbia and Kosovo, the Presidential Envoy for Serbia and Kosovo, Ambassador Rick Grinnell. He'll have a few comments, and then we'll make ourselves available for some questions after Rick and Jared address you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robert. I know there's a lot of reporters who have worked a long time in your industry. And for any reporter that has been working for more than 10 years, you will know this story. There was a terrible war. And this story has been lingering for decades. And so I really want to appeal to you all as journalists to dig deep on this story. This is one of those good news stories that I'm not asking you to do anything but look at the facts and look at really what's been happening here. We've been working very hard on this agreement for a long time. We had 3 agreements last year that went largely unnoticed by Washington reporters. And I just really have to say, I think it's a shame when we talk a lot about symbolism and we don't dig deep on these stories that last 21 years. What we've been able to accomplish here by pushing the 2 parties together is truly historic. The way that this came about is that the politics were stuck. Everybody knows that. We've been fighting and talking about the same thing for decades. They have been fighting about the same symbolism, words, verbs, adjectives. It's been a nightmare. And what President Trump said to me was, they're fighting politically about everything. Why don't we give it a try to do something different and creative? Why not try to do economics first and let the politics follow the economics? That proved to actually be a formula that they were eager for. No one had been talking to them about this. We have an establishment foreign policy team in Washington, D.C. that literally keeps pounding the same meetings and issues over and over. I'm telling you that the only way that this agreement could have happened is from an outsider. All of the insiders in Washington said, you're not talking about recognition. You're not talking about this symbolic word. And what we tried to do is ignore that. And from an outsider perspective, go in and dig deep. I ask you to look at this agreement and see all of the details that have been hard fought, negotiated, that will move both economies and the entire region forward. This is economic normalization. It's a first step. I think the Europeans are going to be very happy. We've been on the phone a couple of times with the National Security Advisor in Germany, the National Security Advisor in France to brief them. We briefed them on the strategy, and we are briefing them again today on the details of this agreement. This is something that I feel very strongly about. It will make Americans safer. It'll make American companies more prosperous. This is a region that's been largely shut out because of a perceived conflict. Whether or not there's been a conflict, there has been a perceived conflict. European businesses and American businesses largely have refused to go in and grow in these areas. Now we will be able to open this up, whether it's in energy, water, construction of roads, railways, mines. These are all industries that are going to be opened up to European and hopefully American businesses to go in and help the people create an industry, which means creating jobs in the region, but also US jobs for Americans and American companies. The last thing I'll say before we turn it over to Jared, the people of Serbia and the people of Kosovo are ecstatic about this agreement and are very thankful that there was an outside administration to look at this situation and not do the typical political thing. If we would have done the typical political thing and listened to all of the really smart people at NGOs and think tanks here in Washington, D.C., we would not have this agreement. Take just a quick look at the criticism and the lead up to this of what we should have been talking about and what we weren't talking about. It's all been squarely in the same old political dialogue that was stuck. And I'm really thankful that President Trump challenged us to say, think differently, think from an outsider's perspective. And that was the key to the whole thing. So I really urge you to look at the details and see, and talk to the leaders in Kosovo and Serbia. Ask them how this came about. Ask them how the process went. And I think you'll see that this outsider perspective of doing things differently is what worked.
Thank you, Ambassador Grinnell, an incredible job working through this historic agreement, and Ambassador O'Brien. This is just another chapter that this administration has been able to write towards making the world a safer and more peaceful place. President Trump, when he ran for politics, was not a politician. He sees things through a prism that not a lot of politicians look through, which is, how can I truly do things that will make people's lives better, make people find common interests and opportunities, and figure out ways to resolve conflicts that, quite frankly, politicians have allowed to go on for far too long. Today's breakthrough really is historic, and we have had so many historic things this week that we shouldn't be minimizing the significance of all the different things that happened. I started the week with Ambassador O'Brien in Jerusalem, where we met with the Prime Minister, and then took the first ever commercial flight from Israel to United Arab Emirates. We broke that barrier, which brought a lot of hope to the Middle East. And for the last years, I've been listening to a lot of people tell us in the administration all of the things we were doing wrong while we were looking at this the wrong way. And what the president's done is he's reversed now 20 years of bad foreign policy in the Middle East, where we've allowed our country to get trapped in a lot of these wars that, quite frankly, don't do much for our country. We have to make sure that we're keeping our country safe, and we need to figure out how we can get people in the Middle East and in Europe to get along, so that we can spend our resources and our treasure on building up our countries and building up our cities and helping our citizens. And what you've seen through President Trump's first 3.5 years is he's trying to end a lot of these endless wars. He's making peace agreements. He's bringing people together, and he's bringing our troops back home to America, while figuring out how to get along with different countries and reducing the foreign threats that we have. Second, this week, obviously, we were in Saudi Arabia, and then Saudi Arabia announced the historic opening of their airspace, which, again, brings people in the Middle East closer together. And then yesterday, Bahrain announced the same thing, that they'll be opening up their airspace, which, again, will allow flights and better commerce and interaction between peoples to happen in the Middle East in a much quicker way. Today, we announced another normalization with Israel, which, quite frankly, a lot of the divide between the anti-Semitism that we have in the world, the terrorism we have in the world, comes from the notion that people are divided, and leaders will exploit divisions and religious differences to try and keep people divided, to cause conflict, often to maintain power for themselves that they mask in an ideological way. This breakthrough, again, brings people closer and shows people in the world that anything is possible if we push for it. And again, fundamentally, President Trump believes that no matter who you are, no matter where you're from, no matter what country you're in, all people want the same thing, which is they want the opportunity to live freely, live better lives, have economic opportunity, and live in peace. And today, again, is another historic step forward that politicians have spoken about for decades, but haven't been able to deliver on. And it's another victory for this administration and really for the world. And so I want to give my congratulations to the people of Serbia and the people of Kosovo, and to the people of Europe, and also to the people of Israel, who will, reap tremendous benefits from this agreement. So thank you.
Ambassador O'Brien, the U.S. government determined that Russians are seeking to, quote, undermine faith in the electoral process by spreading disinformation about the accuracy of voter data for expanded vote by mail. And President Trump has also said that states' voter data is not accurate. And he's telling people to not trust that their mail-in ballots are counted. So is the president helping Russia spread disinformation?
Well, I think what we have when it comes to elections and what the intelligence community has made very clear is that first you have China, which has the most massive program to influence the United States politically. You have Iran and you have Russia. These are all three adversary countries that are seeking to disrupt our elections. Some of them prefer Biden. Some people say some of them prefer the president. My position is it doesn't matter what these countries want, that any country that attempts to interfere with free and fair elections in the United States has to be stopped. We've taken unprecedented action. The president has taken unprecedented action in funding the hardening of our election infrastructure, whether it's cyber or otherwise. Obviously, there are tremendous concerns about mail-in ballots. In the news every night, there seems to be another picture of some apartment building in some city with thousands of ballots stacked up in the foyer of the apartment building or that sort of thing. So I think there are concerns about mail-in ballots. I think that those concerns are very different than being concerned about foreign adversaries trying to influence our elections. And we've made it a red line. We've made it very clear to the Chinese, to the Russians, to the Iranians, and others that haven't been publicly disclosed, that anyone who tries to anyone that attempts to interfere with American elections will face extraordinary consequences.
But Russia said
Ambassador O'Brien, a question on Serbia and Kosovo, then I just have a follow-up on that. In terms of the two parties agreeing to freeze the recognition and de-recognition campaigns, how long will that last, and how important is it to the administration that Serbia recognize Kosovo's independence?
So I think it's a year freeze. So that the idea of that freeze is to give the parties time to negotiate some of the political issues that are between them and our European partners. There's a European special envoy, Mr. Lajcak, who's involved in those talks. We're going to be supporting the Europeans in those political talks. There are a lot of issues involved there, whether it's EU membership or mutual recognition. So there are a number of issues that the Serbs and Kosovars will address. We'll support the Europeans as they address those issues. What we wanted to do in this agreement was create some breathing space for the parties to engage in those without the back and forth campaign of recognition and de-recognition. What's striking, though, is that as part of that deal, Kosovo was allowed, and I shouldn't say allowed, that Kosovo did make the decision as a Muslim majority country to normalize its relations with Israel, to recognize Israel, and to establish an embassy in Jerusalem, in the capital of Israel. And we appreciate the fact that the Serbs not taking a position on that. So although we're going to have a suspension of the de-recognition campaign and the recognition campaign, it's two sides of the same coin for the next year, we were able to achieve, with the courage and bravery of the leaders of President Vučić and Prime Minister Houti and Prime Minister Netanyahu, we were able to achieve this very remarkable breakthrough. Again, the second time in now a month. It took, I think, 40 years to have two Muslim majority countries recognize Israel. Now we've had two Muslim majority countries recognize Israel in less than a month. So it's a remarkable achievement in the context of this overall freeze that will give the parties space to negotiate a deal.
Just to follow up on what Ben was asking you, Attorney General Barr said earlier this week that he feels China is being more aggressive in meddling in the election than Russia is. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I agree with him 100%.
And then I just want to follow up on that, and I've also got a question about Israel. Can you just characterize at this point the extent and the level to which both China, Russia, and other foreign countries are right now trying to spread disinformation about the 2020 campaign?
Yeah, look, it's hard to know, what impact they can have or how they're spreading things. I think some of our tech companies are doing a good job in trying to police whether it's Facebook or Twitter, others are trying to police things in a way that they didn't before. Our intelligence community is doing a good job in trying to track these things. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, with increased funding from this administration, is doing a good job in hardening our infrastructure to make sure that whether it's cyber infrastructure or physical infrastructure, to make sure that we're not susceptible to having our the choice that the American people make on election day changed by some foreign party. There's always going to be propaganda. There's always going to be efforts to influence us. And again, we know that the Chinese have taken the most active role, but the Russians and the Iranians and other countries are involved as well. So we're going to keep monitoring it, and we're going to do everything we can to protect the sanctity of our election. That's the foundation of our democracy. That's what makes us America, and we're just not going to tolerate these other countries trying to get involved in our elections.
In the Oval Office, just an Israel question. Can I?
Sure, quick follow-up on Israel.
Yeah, just,
I want to make sure everyone gets a chance.
The president had said in the Oval Office earlier that there are other Arab countries that are also interested in following in the UAE's footsteps. Can you talk about where we're at on that process? What countries are interested
I'm going to turn
in?
that over to Senior Vice President Jared, who's just returned from the region, and maybe he'll give you some background there.
Thank you. Not going to give as much background, but bottom line is when we did the Israel United Arab Emirates deal, that because of the diplomacy that we were able to do was to keep things private. Obviously, we had some great discussions in the region, and we are hopeful that more people will want to move forward. I think a lot of the countries are quite envious of the opportunities that will now be available to the United Arab Emirates in terms of mutual investments, mutual tourism, investing in technology, security partnerships. So we're seeing that peace agreement actually starting to really pick up a lot of momentum, and the delegations that traveled with Ambassador O'Brien and myself had very, very fruitful discussions. I think both sides were surprised to see the eagerness of the other side to move forward, and the level of getting agreements adjudicated and completed is happening much quicker than people thought. Other countries, again, see the benefits of having a Middle East and that's united. And if you look at what President Trump did on his first foreign trip, he went to Saudi Arabia and he outlined very clearly what his strategy was going to be, what he saw as the challenges. And again, if you just go from that snapshot to now, 3.5 years later, you have a Middle East where ISIS is defeated, Iran has been significantly rolled back, the proxies that they've been funding that have been spreading terror and instability throughout the region are much shorter on cash than they were before. He's brought the different sides together. And, one story that I think doesn't get enough attention is the fact that in the last election, a lot of what we were talking about was the spread of extremism through the internet, and then also the funding of terror groups. And President Trump on that first trip set up two different organizations in Saudi Arabia. One was the Counter-Terror Finance Organization that unified a lot of the Middle Eastern systems with our Treasury Department, and we got more transparency than we've ever had. That significantly reduced the amount of funding that's gone to terror groups over the last 3.5 years. The next thing we set up was the Counter Extremism Center, which has been fighting the ideological battle online and has been making really a tremendous amount of progress towards reducing the misinformation that's been used to pervert a lot of the youth. So we're seeing a lot of progress in the Middle East, and I think a lot of countries at this point see it as an inevitability that they're going to have normal relations with Israel, and that in order for people to live better lives, it's not dissimilar to Serbia and Kosovo, where their leaders are coming together to realize that while there are differences, human beings want to get together, they want to have better lives and opportunity, and the more that the leaders in the Middle East, put old differences behind, they're creating a new opportunity for a new Middle East and a bright future where people can live securely, practice whatever religion they choose, respect each other, and have economic opportunity, which is critical towards people, seeing a pathway to a better life.
Thank you. This is actually for Jared. With two questions, I'll just combine them to make this easier. With the election coming up in 2 months, I'm curious as to how you feel about what you've accomplished so far, but whether or not you feel pressure to get more done before November. And secondly, because I know you would have been part of these conversations at the time, I do want to ask you about that Atlantic report that we saw today and how in a 2018 planning meeting for a military parade, the president reportedly said he didn't want amputees there. He said nobody wants to see that. Have any of you, but particularly you, ever heard the president talk like that?
The answer is no. Look, what I find in Washington is strange is sometimes you'll have a couple unnamed sources and then the media treats that as a panacea. and then you'll have 10 people on the record saying it didn't happen, and you give no credence to that. That does not represent the way that I've seen the president conduct himself. He has tremendous respect for the military, for our veterans. He's, again, the media tries to ascribe a different way, but you have to look at his actions, and I think his actions have been incredible towards supporting the military, strengthening the military, and strengthening our veterans. But with regards to your question on timing, look, deals happen when deals are ready, and I do think that you can't just come in, wave a magic wand, and make impossible deals happen, right? People describe peace in the Middle East as something that's it's less a deal than more of a saying for what is impossible, and it's taken a lot of building blocks that had to be moved, a lot of untraditional moves. When the president moved the embassy to Jerusalem, when he recognized the Golan Heights, when he got out of the Iran deal, when we did our economic conference in Bahrain. It's probably 50 decisions that the president's made that allowed him to create a different course. And each one along the way, you've had people like the magazine you mentioned before criticizing his foreign policy, saying it wasn't strategic, it didn't have a plan. But again, he's not a traditional Washington person, and the traditional Washington people have a track record of creating those wars that we have sent our soldiers to, that have led to a lot of them getting killed or hurt. And President Trump's been ending those wars and bringing his soldiers back home. And so I would say deals happen when deals are ready. And the deal that you saw last week had nothing to do with the election. It had everything to do with the fact that it's time for the president to start harvesting some of the accomplishments that he spent years building the foundation in order to achieve. And what I would say too is that if you look at the world, foreign policy is a big chess game, and you have a lot of pieces all over the board in different places. And the president's been masterful with the way that he's built different relationships, taken some pieces off the board, created different issues in other places. And I think that he set the board up very, very well now to have continued successes in the years ahead. So obviously the voters will decide whether they give President Trump 4 more years. But if they do give him 4 more years, I think you'll see that Iran is in a much weaker position than they were 4 years ago. North Korea, we've had obviously a much better situation they had 4 years ago. Venezuela's in a different situation. The Middle East went from a place that, again, when President Trump got in, Libya was a mess, Syria was a mess, Yemen was a mess. All of our allies felt alienated. Iraq was a mess. And you see a much different Middle East today than we had 3.5 years ago. And that's not an accident. That's because President Trump has had a good strategy, and he's worked very hard to manifest that. So now we're starting to see some of the fruits from his labor. But I do believe that we'll see even more and more of that as time goes on. So we're set up for more successes, hopefully in the weeks ahead, the months ahead, but definitely in the years ahead, to take President Trump's America First foreign policy, where he's making trade deals for the first time that are endorsed by our workers and our labor unions, that are bringing jobs back home. He's representing our farmers, he's representing our ranchers, he's representing our manufacturers. And he's also ending these endless wars and figuring out how to bring our soldiers home and fighting the threats from overseas so that Americans can prosper here at home.
Let me just weigh in for 1 second on your last question about the Atlantic article, which I thought was really a sad article for any magazine to have published. And while I wasn't in the meeting that's described there, I worked for this president for 2.5 years, first as a hostage envoy and for the last year as national security advisor. In both those jobs, I've had to meet extensively with the president on military issues, whether it's a hostage rescue mission or how we're going to deploy our troops around the world. Look, in my current job, I have the sad duty of having to call him sometimes in the middle of the night if we lose a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine in combat, which fortunately hasn't happened since February, or in a training accident. We've had some of those recently. And I can tell you how hard those calls are for me to make, but also for the president to receive. I've spent a bunch of time with the president on numerous trips to Dover, and seeing how he's been with the families of our fallen heroes for those dignified transfers. And I can tell you that's the toughest job any president has, is to go up to Dover and bring our fallen heroes home and mourn with their families and grieve with their families and comfort their families. And I think if you talk to any of them who had been there for the transfers when the president's been there, I've seen him send me to Dover. I've got, when he couldn't go because of scheduling issues or him being overseas, and asking me to represent him there. I've been with him at Walter Reed, where we've seen our wounded heroes, and the interaction between the president and our wounded heroes at Walter Reed is something that's pretty incredible to see. I can tell you when we discuss options, and sometimes we have to discuss military options for some of the foreign policy and national security issues that we face, the president will ask me, is there a way that we can do this without sending U.S. soldiers or sailors or Marines or airmen into harm's way? If we have to send them into harm's way, and it's going to be a tough situation, like the Baghdadi raid, for example, how do we make sure we protect them to the maximum extent available? And if that means putting 3 or 4 levels of air power over them, it means doing that. And the president is unstinting in what he's willing to provide to our troops. He's funded the military so that we can give them every tool necessary to accomplish our missions and come home safely. So I think if you talk to any of us who work at the NSC, any of us who've worn the uniform before, whether it's Keith Kellogg or Matt Pottinger or myself or Mark Milley over at the Pentagon, or those that spend a lot of time with the president, especially when military matters are discussed, when our current military personnel, our troops are discussed, our veterans are discussed, you're not going to find anybody who's more sympathetic to their situation than the president of the United States. So I don't believe a word of what was in the Atlantic article, because I've had 2.5 years of working side by side with the president. I've never seen anything like that, and I thought it was pretty disappointing that some magazine would write that.
Ambassador O'Brien, on the topic of service members, first, thanks to all 3 of you for hosting this. Is the U.S. going to respond to Russia's recent aggression toward U.S. forces in Syria?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do constantly is we respond to forces. We're operational security, OPSEC, is critical to us anywhere our soldiers, sailors, airmen, or Marine operate, whether it's in the maritime environment, on land, in the air. And we do see aggressive behavior from the Russians. We've seen that with some of the intercepts that we've seen. We've seen it over the past couple of years and how they've interacted with our naval vessels. We've seen it in this current, in the current situation with the patrols coming across each other. But I can tell you that American forces have rules of engagement designed to protect them, to allow them to defend themselves. There was an unfortunate incident when purportedly Russian mercenaries, attempted to overrun one of our forward operating bases in Syria a couple of years ago. That didn't end too well for them, and because again, President Trump gave our soldiers in that instance the ability to defend themselves, with air power, with long range fires, with their own resources. So we're going to make sure that everywhere we operate, whether it's operating in a place that's in close proximity to the Russians, to any other adversary, that the men and women in uniform will be able to defend themselves and protect themselves.
Has that warning been communicated to the Russian government?
It's been communicated to them very clearly.
By you or by the president?
It's been communicated at the appropriate level.
And to whom was it in Russia specifically?
I'm not going to get into those details because we want to have those channels open, but they've received a very strong message.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ambassador O'Brien. I wanted to follow with a couple on China. I'm wondering what specifically you're seeing from China that makes you believe that they have a bigger or harder working electoral interference operation than Russia or other countries. And then based on that, or the litany of other concerns that you've described about China, if you could kind of tell us the status of efforts by the administration to either go after Chinese firms or imports or diplomatic issues with China.
Yeah, so let me talk about the China situation overall. So probably the biggest failure of American foreign policy over the past 40 years is how we've dealt with China. There was this mantra that somehow as China became richer, as we turned a blind eye to Chinese malign activity, whether it's stealing our IP or engaging in unfair trade practices or bullying its neighbors, if we just turned about bullying its own people at Tiananmen Square, if we would turn the other cheek, turn a blind eye, that China would become richer. As it became richer and the middle class in China grew, they'd become more like us. And we always want to believe that everyone wants to become like us, that they become more Western, more democratic. In fact, all the opposite occurred. China's human rights violations have gotten worse and worse over the years, whether it's the Uyghurs or religious minorities or their neighbors, the people who enjoyed democracy in Hong Kong until just recently, the bullying of Taiwan. So we've seen very malign Chinese activity. The theft of intellectual property has gotten so bad that Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, recently called it the greatest wealth transfer in human history, was the theft by the Chinese of our intellectual property. Now, that's not just an abstract concept. Okay? that's sweat equity. That's American innovators. That's people that have put their whole life into dreams. People who've invented things in their garages. People who've built companies. Who've done everything they can to create an idea and turn an idea into reality. And then what happens? That idea gets stolen by China. And it's not just that they've lost the economic value of their innovation or of their method of doing business. The Chinese have taken it, sometimes using slave labor, but using cheaper labor, often manufacture products that compete at a lower price, and then put the original person who invented the technology out of business, and then kill the industry for the United States, and whole industries go to China, whole manufacturing plants go to China. I mean, it's been really astounding. Chris Wray said that, also said that the FBI is opening a new espionage case against the Chinese every 10 hours. I mean, the scope of Chinese activity against the United States is relentless. We've never seen anything like it. It was nothing like this in the Cold War with the Soviets. So this President Trump, stood up to the Chinese for the first time in 40 years. He put tariffs on the Chinese. We had a phase one trade deal that partially addressed some of the unfair trade practices and was a huge step in the right direction. But as soon as that was signed, we ended up with the president calls it the China plague or the COVID outbreak here, which made that somewhat irrelevant because of the tremendous losses we suffered. Again, because the Chinese wouldn't share the virus samples with us early, wouldn't let CDC doctors come into China early to investigate, wouldn't let WHO doctors come into China to investigate, wouldn't restrict travel from China to overseas, especially to Europe, when they were restricting travel within China. So again, well, look, when it comes to the election, everything that they're doing across the board, whether it's political influence through the Confucius Institutes, whether it's them trying to influence business leaders by saying, if you don't support us in the U.S., your companies won't have opportunities in China, and convey that to your governors and convey that to your political leaders. The massive, and I'm not going to go into all the intelligence, but the massive activities of the Chinese in the cyber realm, it's really an extraordinary thing that we're facing. And again, this is the first president that stood up to the Chinese. I hope he's not going to be the last president who stands up to the Chinese. And as difficult as the problem is, let me tell you, I'm confident in the United States of America. I believe at the end of the day, we're going to prevail. We've got a peace through strength foreign policy, finally, that we've been missing for some time now. We're investing in our defense. We're taking strong action on the diplomatic front against the Chinese. We're taking strong action on the trade front. We're protecting our intellectual property. We're not going to, we've called out the Communist Chinese Party. We're taking strong action and have massive sanctions on the Chinese for the first time because of their treatment of the Uyghurs or their treatment of Democrats in Hong Kong. I think at the end of the day, our allies are going to follow us, which you've seen happening with 5G and Huawei. And we're seeing many countries, including our closest allies, turning away from the Chinese, turning away from Huawei, and going with trusted providers on 5G. So I think at the end of the day, America is going to prevail. I think President Trump's vision of free markets and free women and free men is an attractive message, not just to our allies, but to even people within China. So, I'm confident in the future, but I'll tell you, this is a challenge. It's a heck of a challenge. But I'm convinced that under President Trump's leadership, the American people are up to the challenge. I think we'll turn things over to if there's a Kosovo-Serbia question, raise your hand. And otherwise, I'm going to turn things over to Kate.
Thank you. Right here, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you. Actually, I appreciate you calling on me, but this question may be more appropriate for Rick or Jared in the sense that they deal with both policy and politics. And if I may, as you know, in 1992, President George H.W. Bush ran for re-election largely on his foreign policy successes, and Americans largely rejected him for a second term. What makes you think, based upon the announcement that you made today regarding Kosovo and Serbia, the announcement that came out just a few weeks ago regarding Israel and the UAE, that Americans are more focused on foreign policy, that they care about foreign policy, and that these announcements mean something to them?
Look, I think that these announcements are about President Trump keeping his promise to take on the hard fights, to end the endless wars, and to bring his troops home and to keep Americans safe. And I think that that's what it shows. it also shows that President Trump has a track record of continuing to get things done. You know, he really has a great track record for success. Our economy was going great until obviously the virus hit. We did a dip. People predicted we'd be down to 25% unemployment and that we wouldn't get to single digits unemployment till early next year. And obviously we had a great jobs report that came out today, and we have more coming. So the answer is people will vote for whoever they think will make their lives better. President Trump just happens to be doing a great job at foreign policy, delivering a lot of wins that had previously plagued the last administrations. And quite frankly, the last administrations had a lot of mistakes and a lot of adventurism that, got us into these tough situations in these regions. And today's agreement and all the success this week just shows again that President Trump is getting things done and keeping Americans safe and keeping his promise to the American people. So, but he's not running on his foreign policy. He's running on his track record as the president who built the greatest economy in our country, and somebody who's going to keep Americans safe and continue to get things done for him.
Another follow-up question for Kosovo, please. Ambassador Grinnell, clearly you were effective here as the special envoy to these talks between Serbia and Kosovo. But I wanted to ask you about another initiative you led. Last year, you kicked off the Trump administration push to decriminalize homosexuality.
Yeah, I'm going to just talk about Kosovo and Serbia. I don't know if you can find it on a map, but this is atrocious. I have to tell you guys, you might be too young to understand what this issue is about. Maybe the older journalists should step up and say, this is a big deal. This is a big issue. I'm astounded at what happens in Washington, D.C., and especially in this room. I got to tell you, get substantive. Maybe it's too complicated of an issue for you all.
Respectfully, this is the first time we've had the opportunity to speak with these individuals.
Okay, but today's about Kosovo and Serbia. Let's take a little time and talk about this 21-year issue, Peter. I mean, 21-year issue. We're getting the same questions that are all politics. You guys don't understand what's happening outside of Washington, D.C. People aren't listening to you anymore. It's really a crisis in journalism. And I think it's because people are too young to understand issues like Kosovo and Serbia. How about a substantive question?
I don't think any of us came here for a lecture about our questioning.
Okay, well, I didn't come here to not talk about anything about Kosovo and Serbia.
The question I would like to ask you is it accurate to say that it's full economic normalization? There was some ambiguity as to whether that is what the deal is about. And
what do you mean by full?
Well, that's the question for you.
No, it's a question for you. What's your definition of full? This is economic normalization for whatever the two parties could bring together. A whole bunch on rail, a whole bunch on water, a whole bunch on different industries.
So more accurate to say working towards economic normalization, is that fair?
No, I think it's incredible economic normalization. Air, rail, motor, opening borders, a whole bunch of industries. So again, I don't know what's missing, and I defer to you to say what's outside of economic normalization that's not included here. You tell me.
Genuinely asking so that we can write our stories accurately. Yeah. Do we say that they have achieved an economic normalization deal?
What's changed from a few months ago when they pulled down the tariffs to today? What is the substantive difference?
Have you read the agreement?
You haven't put the agreement out.
It's out. A whole bunch has changed since the dropping of the tariffs. The tariffs were the political sticking point of why we couldn't have the parties come together. The Serb side was not going to even start negotiations when there's a 100% tariff from the Kosovars. So
what's the substantive thing that changed today?
There's a whole bunch of stuff that changed today in terms of economic development, in terms of identification for even some political problems that are going to be resolved. I would really refer you to look at the entire agreement. One sticking point that has been for a long time something that the two sides couldn't agree on was the recognition of diplomas. In Serbia, and your degree was from a Serbian university, you couldn't get a job in Kosovo because you weren't qualified. You didn't have the proper certificate. That now with this agreement goes away. I think that's economic normalization for people who have certificates in dental hygiene, in pharmacies, pharmaceutical experts. There are a whole bunch of people who could not work simply because they didn't have the proper career credentials. And this agreement completely will recognize all diplomas from universities from either side. I'll give you one more example. American companies were telling us they were pulling out, like rental car companies, because if you rented a car in Kosovo, you couldn't drive over the border. You couldn't leave. So people who were wanting to go for tourist purposes or to visit the region or to try to do business deals, they couldn't actually leave with that rental car. And so we had American businesses beginning to pull back to say it just doesn't make sense. The Europeans were complaining just as much. There was a perceived conflict. And I think what we have now with this historic air agreement, rail agreement, motor agreement, all of the things that they've committed to implement will create normalized commerce. And that is something that has never been tried. We have been stuck on literally verbs and symbolism in terms of negotiations on the politics. And we're going to try something new.
The president of Serbia said today to local reporters that, I can read the quote, "We have made a bilateral agreement with the US, not Kosovo." Can you clarify what that means?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would never try to clarify what President Vučić means when he's talking to the Serbian press. I can tell you what he said inside the Oval Office, which was that this was a historic agreement to normalize the region. He talked about the mini Schengen zone, which is now going to be an economic region. So I think it might have been lost in translation a little bit, but make no mistake that the agreement that they signed is definitely an agreement to expand commerce in the region. And there's no question that when you look at diplomas, for instance, or the one-year freeze on recognition and derecognition, on even the rail agreement, there's a U.S. Department of Energy study that will take place on a lake that is largely in Kosovo. A portion is in Serbia. We're going to do a feasibility study to figure out what kind of jobs can be created in around the water. There's no question that that's a shared agreement.
Did they sign an agreement with each other, or did they sign an agreement with the United States?
They signed an agreement to work with each other.
They didn't.
They did not sign with the United States. We're not a signature.
President Trump signed something. We watched him.
Yeah, correct.
What did he sign?
What did he sign?
He signed a, how would you describe it? Basically a letter acknowledging that they are going to work together and do this agreement.
Maybe it's easiest to ask this way. Can you just lay out very specifically what each gentleman signed today? What was that?
They both signed agreements to work together to normalize their economic and commerce relationship.
Agreements are not the same, right?
They are 99.9% the same, but of course there's one point that's different at the very bottom, which is that Serbia is going to move its embassy by July of next year. That's on the Serbian agreement. And for Kosovo, their last point, everything is identical to the last point. The last point for Kosovo is that they have a mutual recognition with Israel.
And the infamous item 10 they were mentioning yesterday, that's taken out, right? I mean, that's what President Vučić was saying today.
Yeah, first of all, it's wrong to say that that was item 10. None of these were numbered. So I don't know where that came from.
They just pulled it out.
When we were negotiating, there were a whole bunch of issues on the table. A lot of things were changed and edited, as you can imagine, in negotiations that this does. For someone to leak a partial sentence and pretend like this was the entire agreement, I think is typical politics. But nothing was numbered, certainly wasn't number 10, and nothing is agreed to until everything is agreed to. So something leaked out in terms of negotiation, but it was partial, and I think it was highlighted in a way that gave a false impression.
Can I just ask one more thing? Maybe it's semantics, but we have been having this dilemma for quite a while now. When you say Shenzhen, do you think Shenzhen as in China's province or Schengen like in Europe? Because we couldn't figure it out.
Europe.
So just to clarify, what did President Trump sign?
So we're not a party to the agreement. And I guess this is super important to remember is that we didn't come, and there's a whole bunch of conspiracy theories out there about what we were coming to the table with. We were not forcing the two parties to do anything. This was a real chance for the two parties to talk. We didn't have any grand scheme. We didn't have any absolute demands. We certainly didn't have, I don't even want to say the word of what some conspiracy theorists say about past agreements with land. It was never discussed in my presence. What the two parties did was agree to move forward economically. What President Trump signed is as a witness to say, this is a great agreement and the United States is happy for it, right? Would you?
Supports it.
Yeah.
Is that normal?
The EU has tried and failed for the past 10 years to accomplish what your team is celebrating today. How confident, candidly, all of you, how confident are you that leadership in the EU, leadership around the world is looking at this as a template for success? Or is it going to take a whole generation of new leadership in order to kind of study what you have accomplished here and in the Middle East?
So I really have to own this to say, I think we all failed for the last 10 years. I wouldn't just put this on the Europeans. I would say that it's the establishment foreign policy thinking that has failed, both in Europe and here, Berlin, Paris, London, Washington, DC. We had great support from the French and from the Germans to try this new way of economic development. And let's also be very clear, the Europeans have a lot of economic development that they can do, and they will do. The team is meeting on Monday in Brussels, and so there's a whole new aspect to this. And let me also just say on the question on this item 10, one of the reasons why we were willing to not talk about it here was because it's on the agenda Monday in Europe. And we're trying to team this with the Europeans to say, what can you do? What can we do to kind of move this forward? So on Monday, that issue will be dealt with very much in detail in Brussels. And so I felt confident that we could kind of let and work with the Europeans on this issue. And so that's why it was taken out. But at the end of the day, we need the Europeans. We need them to help on this issue. We will help them, but their calculus on the political side is a little bit different because both Kosovo and Serbia want EU membership. And so they're looking at this very long path of how to get into the EU. We're supportive of our European partners on their process, but we are not making any demands. We're not a member of the EU, so we don't have a seat at that table, but we certainly will help in any way possible. But that is a separate political process, I think, that of the EU membership rules and regulations and processes.
Talk about the economic pattern of this.
Yeah.
Talk about the success of it.
Thank you all very much. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. So the president is bringing back the hottest economy in modern history. Today's job numbers are proof. There were 1.4 million jobs added in August, beating expectations. Unemployment fell by 1.8%, also beating expectations. Now, nearly 50% of job losses since March have been reversed, a clear V-shaped recovery. Also, I want to address what is quite clearly fake news. The story in The Atlantic has been categorically debunked by eyewitnesses and contemporaneous documents. The Atlantic claims, quote, when President Trump canceled a visit to the Ain Marne American Cemetery near Paris in 2018, he blamed rain for the last-minute decision, according to The Atlantic, saying the helicopter couldn't fly and that Secret Service wouldn't drive him there. Neither claim was true, says The Atlantic. That has been debunked. Behind me, you will see an email from one of the president's military aides that clearly reads, "We are a bad weather call for today's lift." The Atlantic reporting is based on 4 cowardly anonymous sources who probably do not even exist. Meanwhile, within hours, 10 sources, 10, went on the record debunking these lies, 8 with firsthand knowledge, stating on the record one common truth, that this story is false. It never happened. Adding to the 8 that were previously counted, I'm bringing you 2 new ones. One is from Derek Lyons, staff secretary and counselor to the president, who says this: "I was with the president the morning after the scheduled visit. He was extremely disappointed that arrangements could not be made to get him to the site and that the trip had been canceled. I have worked for the president for his entire administration. One of my responsibilities is working with him on the many letters he signs to the families of our nation's fallen heroes. In all my time at the White House," Derek writes, "I have never heard him utter a disparaging remark of any kind about our troops. In my view, he holds the brave men and women of our armed forces in the highest regard." I also bring to you today another quote from a former member of this administration, Dan Walsh, former Deputy Chief of Staff, who is also a retired military officer coming out here, and he wanted me to share with you all. I can attest to the fact that there was a bad weather call in France and that the helicopters were unable to safely make the flight. Overall, the president's support and respect for our American troops, past and present, is unquestionable. And Dan recounted to me several events he went on with the president, like a World War II veteran who flew with the president on the helicopter in Normandy, visits the president had with our wounded warriors, special ops teams who came to the Oval Office, including the team that got al-Baghdadi, and they brought along Conan, the dog, as well. He met with families at the Army-Navy game. He does this routinely. And at the World Series, when he got an opportunity to go watch the Nationals, he brought veterans with him. And I can tell you from what I've seen from this president, I have heard him describe his visits to Walter Reed in detail, and the angst he has had and the compassion he has had and the hurt he has had viewing these warriors who have been absolutely injured in the line of duty and are courageous heroes. And I've heard him recount how meaningful those visits are. I've also seen him just a day before this article came up talk about there was rain and lightning popping around. And he said, "I want to go out there and I want to talk to our World War II veterans. This is America's greatest generation." And the president holds them in the highest of regards. So why would a publication abandon all journalistic integrity and publish this story? It's because the liberal activists at the Atlantic are uninterested in the truth, and they are only interested in peddling conspiracy-laden propaganda. Because here is the one truth. No one, and I mean no one, loves and cares for our servicemen and women as much as President Donald J. Trump. Thank you.
Kaylee, do you have any questions?
Kaylee, who specifically?
There we go. Kaylee coming back there to the reporters and really talking about that Atlantic piece there that insinuates that President Trump made fun of fallen soldiers, and she heavily denied that. You are watching News Now from Fox. Welcome, everybody, as we continue to always bring you the very latest that is happening across the country. We really do appreciate you joining us here worldwide. In the meantime, let's go to just earlier today, President Trump inside the Oval Office talking about that Serbia-Kosovo deal.
Tremendous. And they're really right there. And I think you're going to hear some very good news. And also, to me, maybe even better, I think when it comes to therapeutics, you're going to have some incredible news coming out very soon. I say therapeutics because that's you walk into the hospital, and whether it's a transfusion or a shot, people get better. That's something that I think right now is really incredible. The numbers are way down, as you know. Florida is doing very well. Arizona's been, and very interestingly, I hate to bring up his book, but John Bolton, no friend of mine, they've made the world safer. I look forward to seeing Serbia and Kosovo prosper as we work together on economic cooperation in the region going forward. I look forward to going to both countries someday in the not too distant future. We have a thing called a campaign going on right now, so I think we better devote a little time to that, but we look forward to it. But we're very proud of these two great leaders and for getting this done, and their people are very proud of them, maybe more importantly. And truly it is historic. So I want to thank you both. And if you'd like to sign, you could start, and we'll start the process. Okay, tell you what I'll do. I'm going to give you this one. This is for you. And this is for you. That's for you. That's for you. Thank you very much. Would anybody have any questions for these two great leaders? They are great leaders, too.
Yes, Mr. I asked when, gentlemen, it would be possible to expect normalizing ties politically between your two countries?
So, would you like to respond, or I can have somebody else? Robert, would you like to talk about that?
So I think that the focus here, and I don't want to step on President Vučić or Prime Minister Hoti, but I think today is about normalization of economic ties, and it's really a fantastic step that the two peoples have taken, both Kosovo and Serbia, and it's taken a lot of effort. I think that's a first step, and I think down the road, as those economic ties grow, I think there will be political solutions to outstanding issues. But today we want to focus on the normalization of economic relations between the companies, the opening of border crossings, investment by the United States in both Kosovo and Serbia, deals between Kosovo and Serbia on recognizing each other's diplomas and licenses so that a dentist who's trained in Kosovo can perform his practice or her practice in Serbia and vice versa. So I think there's just a lot of amazing steps that we're taking here. And so I think the focus today is on the economic normalization. And our feeling is that that's going to lead to breakthroughs on the political front in the future.
It's going to really bring them together. Rick Grinnell, please.
I think everybody knows that we've been stuck politically in this issue for decades, and many times fighting about symbolic things. And what President Trump did from the very beginning is say, let's flip it. Let's figure out how to do economics first. You can't pay your rent and you can't buy food with symbolism, but you can when you have a job. And from the very beginning, what President Trump said is, let's give them a little taste of the Trump economy. Let's show them how to develop economics, how to take industries and grow them. And let's see if the concentration on economics and job creation can unstick the political stuff. That remains to be seen. But I think one of the great parts of this agreement is over the next year, we have a freeze on the recognition and derecognition campaigns. That means over this next year, we can see job growth and job creation really take hold in the region. And then a year from now, judge us on where the political process goes.
Thank you, Rick. And speaking of job growth, I think it's important to say that our unemployment rate dropped all the way down to 8.4%. It was just announced an hour ago. And that is many, many months ahead of schedule. They said you won't break 10% at least until next year sometime. And we just hit 8.4%, and we're going down rapidly. Plus, a lot of jobs were produced. But very important, we just broke the 10% mark, and that wasn't going to happen until January, February, March, maybe. And so we're at 8.4%, and that starts to sound much more normal. We're recovering from the China plague, and they are too, by the way. They got hit very hard. Every country did almost. 188 countries got hit. But 8.4% is an incredible number, way ahead of schedule, way ahead of schedule. So again, any other questions for the two gentlemen?
Mr. President, what was your role, Mr. President, in bringing about this economic agreement, and why did it take decades to get to the point that we are at today?
Well, I can tell you that it took decades because you didn't have anybody trying to get it done. We've been working on this for almost from the beginning of the administration, and you had some deep-seated feelings and long-term feelings, and there was a lot of fighting, and now there's a lot of love, and that's the way it's going to be. I think they're going to have a tremendous relationship, and the economic is going to bring them together. It's going to unify the two countries, and it was just something that was so obvious to me right from the beginning. And Rick Grinnell, I think in particular, he would talk about it all the time. He didn't understand why this had to be, and he was right. And he brought them together with Robert and with Jared and Avi. So many people were involved, but it just seemed to be such a natural fit. And I think you're going to see some really tremendous things are going to happen. In addition, it's going to be great economically for both countries. Plus, it also opens up the United States much more easily to both countries. We don't have to worry about these two sort of warring nations, fighting nations. And I think they're going to have a fantastic relationship. Economics can bring people together, and that's what's happening right here. But my people did a fantastic job. They really did a fantastic job. Any other questions for the? Yes, please. I'd like you to say.
If you allow me, I'm really honored and privileged to be here and representing Serbia here in Oval Office. And thank you, Mr. President, for doing a great job. When I say great job, I really mean it, because your people and you wanted to engage yourself into a matter that, as a matter of fact, very few people wanted to do, and also your commitment to stabilize the region and to bring peace and stability into the region is something that we appreciate a lot. It's something of an utmost significance for us. But speaking about economy, of course, speaking about politics, we haven't resolved all our problems. There are still a lot of differences between us, but this is a huge step forward, and I am once again profoundly grateful to you and to your people that you successfully got us here. And we didn't speak about many items that we signed today, but for us it's very important that we are going to have a unified economic zone in an entire Western Balkans, which will bring us to the real economic results for the benefit and for the sake of all our people. Once again, Mr. President, we appreciate and we respect your role. And if I may use or misuse this opportunity to extend an invitation to you to visit Serbia. The last US president that visited Serbia was Jimmy Carter because of Tito's funeral. Come to Serbia and you'll see the most hospitable reception, and you'll see how people of Serbia would react to them. Once again, many thanks to you, many thanks to Rick, to Jared, to Mr. Pence, to Robert O'Brien, to all the people that dedicated their time and bringing us here to our office. Thank you once again.
Congratulations. Thank you very much. Please.
If I may, Mr.
Yes,
President.
please.
So thank you very much for your exceptional role and for your great team that we came to this point. I think absolutely this is a great moment for Kosovo and for the region. I think we made a huge step forward toward full normalization of relations that should lead eventually to mutual recognition between the two countries. We are fully committed to work together to improve people's lives, to create new jobs in the region, and we fully believe in your administration. We share the same values of freedom, democracy, and open market economy. So we are looking forward to start implementing this agreement as soon as possible.
Going to be very successful. We have no doubt.
Absolutely.
We have no doubt. It's too bad this couldn't have happened many years ago, but you needed somebody to
That's right.
work it and bring it together. So congratulations to.
Oh, Mr. President, I just want to extend all of our congratulations to the President of Serbia and the Prime Minister of Kosovo. Mr. President, you demonstrated again a commitment to peace. And today's agreement on economic cooperation, we believe, as the President and Prime Minister do, as you do, that this is an important step toward peace in the Balkans in the long term. But let me also say how much we appreciate and welcome the important steps that both of these countries are making, Mr. President, in the direction of recognizing Israel and moving embassies to Jerusalem, as you have done. The good book says, blessed are the peacemakers. And Mr. President, I think the American people, the people of Serbia, the people of Kosovo that are looking on know that there are three peacemakers here, and we've made an important step with this economic agreement toward lasting peace in the Balkans. I want to congratulate them, and I want to congratulate you, Mr. President, on your leadership that brought us to this historic day.
Thank you, Mike, very much. I'd like to have a really great senator, Ron Johnson, Wisconsin, and you have a lot of people from Serbia and Kosovo living in your state, and you were a big part of it. So thank you, Ron, very much. Would you like to say something?
Well, first of all, this is a really big deal. I could not be happier for everybody, particularly the people of Kosovo and Serbia. This was a brilliant strategy. Now, I've been involved. I made multiple trips to both Kosovo and Serbia. And by the way, if you go, you will find what fantastic hosts the folks from Kosovo and Serbia are. But this has taken real political courage. This is not easy. As much as we can say, well, what's the big deal? This is a really big deal. But it really was the leadership shown by President Vučić, Prime Minister of Kosovo. The beauty of focusing on economics is that their people will see the benefit and they will be able to overcome and take the next step. This is a big day for, I think, stability in the Balkans as well. So again, I'm just glad to be here to see the culmination of this. And I just want to congratulate everybody involved, but in particular, I want to congratulate the people of Kosovo and Serbia. America is your friend, and we want nothing but the best for the people of Kosovo and Serbia.
And you have a very good tennis player playing right now in the U.S. Open, right?
The best in the world. My father, best in the world. Number one.
Djokovic.
Yes.
Djokovic. He's a great player.
Yes, many NBA players.
Yes, you
many
do.
NBA players. Yes. And very good players, as a matter of fact.
They're all as tall as you are, even a little bit taller, maybe.
Yes.
Well, we want to thank you both, and this has been really terrific. Would you have any other questions for the Prime Minister or the President?
I want to ask you about the economy. Today, obviously, there was 1.4 million jobs that were added. At this pace, though, it'll still take a full year before all the jobs lost before the pandemic are regained. Is that good enough?
I think what's happening is you're going to see tremendous growth in the very near future. We're rounding the curve. We're coming up with vaccines. I think the vaccines are going to be announced very soon. And I think you're going to see great companies announcing these vaccines. I spoke with Pfizer today. I speak with the different companies, Johnson & Johnson, as you know, doing really well. Moderna. We have tremendous talent, tremendous scientists, and they're really right there. And I think you're going to hear some very good news. And also, to me, maybe even better, I think when it comes to therapeutics, you're going to have some incredible news coming out very soon. I say therapeutics because that's you walk into the hospital, and whether it's a transfusion or a shot, people get better. That's something that I think right now is really incredible. The numbers are way down, as you know. Florida is doing very well. Arizona has been actually a little bit of a miracle how quickly it went down, because it went up and it went down very quickly. Two really great governors. Texas, great governor, same thing. California, the numbers are way down. So we're really starting to see those areas that popped up are really going down. The mortality rates, you look at the percentages, what's happening, and that's because of the convalescent plasma. It's because of the remdesivir. It's for a lot of different reasons, but we do have therapeutics that are really having an impact. And you're looking at what's going on. I've seen numbers from 50 to 85% better. So that's really something. So we're very proud of the job we're doing. And I think in particular, not only the great companies, but the companies, every one of them has said to me, if this was a more typical kind of presidency, I'll be nice. If this was a more typical kind of president, getting these approvals would take 2 or 3 years. And they'll have them, I mean, as far as we're concerned, they're very close to announcing some very big news. So we're honored by that. And I've had a team, whether it's Vice President Mike Pence, head of the task force, and all of the people on the task force, and they've really done a great job. I don't think they've been recognized for the great job they've done. And last night I read out in Pennsylvania, Latrobe, the home of the great Arnold Palmer. But I read out some statistics on how we're doing compared to other parts of the world, and we're doing phenomenally well. And if you took New York, because New York was just, really, they made a lot of mistakes in New York. But if you took that out, the tremendous number of deaths in New York, if you took that out, our numbers are just about as good as anybody in the world. And even without that, without taking it out, you see the kind of numbers we have. So we've done a good job. We've done a great job in helping governors. I think every governor is very happy. Not everybody expresses it to the media, but they do at the task force meetings. We've had task force meetings where they're late, then they'll go out and talk to the press, and they won't be quite as generous, but that's okay. But for the most part, I think we've helped. In every case, we've helped every governor, and we've helped them a lot. And some of them we've made look very good, and some have done a really great job, and others haven't. But as a country, we have really done a terrific job, and I want to thank Vice President Pence. But I won't thank too much right now, because we like to get the job finished first. And the vaccines are going to come out soon, and the therapeutics are continuing, and that's why we're having the kind of numbers we have. And I'll be doing a news conference today at 5 o'clock, so I'll see you there, okay?
Sir, do you need to apologize to service members and veterans?
No, it was a fake story written by a magazine that was probably not going to be around much longer, but it was a totally fake story, and that was confirmed by many people who were actually there. It was a terrible thing that somebody could say the kind of things, and especially to me, because I've done more for the military than almost anybody else. You look at how the VA is doing, it's doing incredibly well. We got all sorts of things done, from accountability to veterans' choice to everything. And it's got right now the highest approval rating that it's ever had, 91% approval rating. It's never been anywhere close to that. Nobody's done what I've done, and that includes salary increases, but it really includes the rebuilding of our military, because as you know, when I came here, our military was totally depleted. And we spent $0.5 trillion, much more than you spent on your military, I can tell you that, right? Slightly more. $2.5 trillion, all made in the USA, F-35s, brand new jets and rockets and missiles, and hope to God that we never have to use it, but our nuclear is now in extraordinary shape, including new weapons. I just hope we never have to use that, because that's a level of power that you don't even want to talk about. You don't even want to hear about it. So it's a fake story, and it's a disgrace that they're allowed to do it. And very interestingly, I hate to bring up his book, but John Bolton, no friend of mine, I thought he was, didn't know too much about what he was doing. He didn't do a good job. But he wrote a book, and he talks about this incident, and he doesn't mention it. And frankly, a lot of reporters, even some pretty bad ones, they read that, and that was the end of the story. There's nobody that considers the military, and especially people that have given their lives in the military, to me, they're heroes. To me, they're heroes. It's even hard to believe how they could do it, and I say that. It's so the level of bravery. And to me, they are absolute heroes. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
And President Trump will be having that news conference 5 p.m. Eastern. You will find it right here on newsnowfox.com. Let's continue with more coverage across the country right now.
To seek the truth and to have equal justice for all, regardless of who you are. Seeking the truth. Nothing more should be our solution to solving our most pressing problems.